Part 49. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 490. Musian lit the candles in the room, and the warm firelight dissipated the darkness in the room, and presented concubine Shangyan's appearance unreservedly in Musian's field of vision. Her sexy curves are highlighted by her raven black clothes, and she has a different and charming charm that is different from usual. There was a touch of silver brilliance flowing in those majestic pale golden eyes. A pair of small and exquisite feet peeked out from under the raven black skirt. The calf curve was perfect. The loose clothes covered her buttocks, but because she was sitting in front of the desk, she still had a seductive buttocks curve. The belt tightly outlines the slender waist, and a little further up, the chest is plump and straight, which can be said to be extremely perfect, with regular bulges and graceful curves. It seems that the sect master is not the sect master now. She will appear here to find me. Is it a completely unconscious behavior? Musian observed it for a few times and couldn't help but secretly thought when he saw Shang Yanfei's seemingly confused look in her eyes. Although there was no trace of karma burning on her body, her beautiful eyes were a bit more gentle than her usual majesty, which was inconsistent with her temperament. The woman's eyes were always staring straight at him, as if she was suppressing her emotions, maintaining herself reservedly, and maintaining the majesty of the master of a sect. Her curly black hair spreads like a waterfall, and a strand of hair falls on her face. Compared with the mysterious big sister posture in the past, she now looks more messy and lazy. Sister Sect Master, how are you now? Is there anything you need my help with? Musian gathered his thoughts, stepped forward to her side, and asked in a low voice. Concubine Shangyan looked at her with confused eyes, and said as if she was murmuring in her sleep, "Go, go, and call Linger." Linger? Does it mean that she can suppress the karma fire with her spiritual speaking skills? If Linger can suppress karma fire, why didn't you let her open this mouth before? Musian felt something was wrong. She can suppress the karma for me tonight. After that, I will find a way to let that spiritual consciousness leave my body. Hearing the gentle murmur of the sect leader's sister, Musian finally understood what she meant. Most of her current energy is used to suppress the karmic fire, so I am afraid that half of her body is occupied by the original witch. No wonder the sect leader's sister's temperament now looks a bit different from that of the original witch. But it stands to reason that since sister sect leader can suppress Yahuo and talk to me, why not go to Linger by herself? Why should she go through me? Well, every step she takes must have its own meaning. Think about why she does it. Musian pondered for a moment, and then, looking at the magnificent empress and her seemingly stiff body, he was suddenly stunned. Then, he looked at concubine Shangyan strangely. He suddenly understood. Concubine Shangyan can still talk to him normally, which shows that she has not really lost her mind completely, but the sect leader is too reserved, and even if she needs to suppress the karma fire, she does not want to take the initiative. The previous rejection of Musian in Qingmei Garden was out of her own reservation, and she also didn't want Qing Emperor to watch them from the side. But appearing in his room and asking for his help was just an illusion. Her real purpose was to change from an active party to a passive party. In other words, all it takes is Musian to take the initiative at this time. If I really turned around and asked Linger for help now, I don't know what she would think. Musian suddenly had such an interesting thought in his mind. Of course, thinking about it, he wouldn't do something as bad as a beast. He put all these messy thoughts behind his mind, stretched out his hand and gently hugged Shang Yanfei's slender waist that could only be grasped. Like Ya Lingxian and others, in Mu Jian's heart, concubine Shang Yan has always been the one he respects the most. Although he was not a master, in Mu Jian's heart, he never dared to have too many thoughts about the sect master. Of course, just because you don't dare doesn't mean you really don't have one. Sometimes when visiting her at Lianji Peak, Musian would inevitably have some thoughts. For example, What would it be like to practice with such a mysterious big sister? If it had been before, Musian might not have been able to answer. But at this moment, he already had a very clear understanding. When it comes to feeling, there are only two words: pleasure. Just like the scene he had thought about countless days and nights in the past, when Musian hugged her slender waist from behind, no matter how magnificent the sect leader was, his face could not help but be stained with a faint blush at this moment. While feeling the beauty of having a beautiful woman in his arms, Musian bent down and lifted up concubine Shangyan, her soft and light body completely leaning on Musian's arms. Regardless of whether the sect leader's sister is in the Hedeo realm or the Ascension realm, she still weighs the weight of a normal woman when she is picked up, Musian sighed inwardly. Concubine Shangyan was different from other women Musian knew. She was the only great white shark of unknown strength in Musian's fish pond. When he first met her, he thought she was Hedeo realm. But judging from the subsequent contact with her and even the various things that happened, it seems that her strength is not in the Hedeo realm, and is somewhat of a mystery. Musian turned around and blew out the candle, leaving only a candle flame. With the help of candlelight, you can vaguely see the stunning beauty of the beauty, and her beautiful eyes seem to be flowing with silver brilliance, giving her an inexplicable sense of charm. Musian gently placed her on the bed and was about to approach her. At this time, Shang Yanfei reached out and gently pressed on his shoulder. She seemed a little uncomfortable or shy, and whispered, "Wait a minute." Musian silently stared at this beautiful face and whispered, "Does the sect master hate me?" Shang Yanfei remained silent. Musian lowered his head and looked into her eyes gently. He could actually understand Shang Yanfei's thoughts to some extent. If the witch's consciousness had not entered the sect master's body and disrupted her original plan, she would probably not appear in Tianhe Garden now, let alone rely on him to suppress the fire of karma. Although he didn't know what Shang Yanfei wanted, at least, the appearance of the original witch this time should be something she didn't expect. Facing Musian's question, after an unknown period of silence, the woman's voice sounded faintly in the room, "Not annoying." Her beautiful eyes flickered with a moist luster, and she whispered, "Do you like teasing people so much?" Musian saw that she seemed to be a little embarrassed, and couldn't help but reveal a satisfied smile. Looking down at the beauty in his arms, Musian gazed at her gently and said softly, "What kind of feelings do you have for me, sister sect leader? Do you like me?" Before she opened her mouth to answer, Musian slowly lowered his head and occupied the red lips of the sect leader. Shang Yanfei's beautiful eyes were slightly surprised. In the past, Musian always looked obedient in front of her, but she didn't expect that this person would have such courage. But slowly, Shang Yanfei's eyes gradually softened, and her hands hooked around Musian's neck, responding to Musian's kiss. After an unknown amount of time, Shang Yanfei's eyes gradually returned to their former expressions. In the darkness, she took a breath gently and exhaled slowly, allowing her emotions to gradually return to a calm state. For some reason, the woman's face was stained with a faint blush, and then she said in a calm and quiet tone in her heart, "Are you satisfied now? Why are you so angry? My Malang is a natural furnace. It is also a good thing for you to get the spiritual energy of the heavenly court earlier. Isn't it good to experience it earlier?" The soft and seductive voice of the original witch came from her body, and she seemed satisfied. "You can also be satisfied by choosing the maids around him. Why do you need to rely on me to satisfy yourself?" Shang Yanfei's tone has returned to its former calmness, but when she noticed the boy hugging her tightly behind her and the warm breath in his arms, her eyes couldn't help but soften a little. How can it be the same? The original witch seemed to be sitting in the void at this moment, revealing a charming smile. "You are the leader of Lianji sect, the empress who is high above in the eyes of the world, and that child has always cared about you and has always wanted to find out your true identity. Think about it, he has always respected you in the past. Although he has some thoughts, he dare not reveal them. As a result, you need his help at this time. This will make people feel extremely happy and accomplished. Shang Yanfei closed her eyes slightly, and the next moment, her spiritual consciousness also escaped into her body. Looking at the woman in black sitting in the void, she showed a kind smile. So you set your sights on me? Are you sure what he is thinking? The witch smiled faintly. I am not just the love and desire of the original witch's 7 emotions and 6 desires. Similarly, I can also see who others love deeply in their hearts. In fact, I am also helping you. You have been lonely for so long. Haven't you ever thought about looking for him in your heart? Just like the Green Emperor. Shang Yanfei looked at her indifferently. 7 emotions and 6 desires are human nature, and I am no exception, but I am not as desperate as you to seek pleasure. Oh! The witch suddenly smiled. If so, why did you go to the hot spring before dash? Her voice paused slightly, because she saw a formation appearing out of thin air under her feet. It's useless. As long as I don't want to leave, you can't drive me out of your body, the witch said confidently. Shang Yanfei tilted her head slightly, looking at her playfully, with a look of disdain, and whispered, Who told you it was you? I want to drive you away. Not only will I not drive you away, I will also repay you well. The witch's eyes flickered when she noticed the depth hidden in Shang Yanfei's pale golden eyes, and said, What do you want to do? She had a bad feeling. Don't you like this body of mine? Tonight I will temporarily give you the initiative of this body. However, I will seal the furnace and let you become an ordinary person without spiritual energy tonight. By the way, there will be another backlash of bad luck in the second half of the night. The charming smile on the face of the original witch stopped abruptly. She knew that Shang Yanfei's bad luck backlash had not yet completely ended. At that time, the karmic fire caused by bad luck would inevitably make her emotions soar, and the seal of the furnace and cauldron meant that there would be no blessing of spiritual energy. Although it is impossible for any cultivator to refuse the spiritual energy of the heavenly court, the spiritual energy of the heavenly court that a person can bear is limited. Even if she was the original witch, it would be difficult for her to withstand such overwhelming spiritual energy from the heavens when the furnace was sealed. Wait a minute, I was wrong, don't do this, I dash. The original witch's voice stopped suddenly. When she opened her eyes, she felt that there seemed to be misfortune quietly pouring out. In the quiet night, except for the occasional sect disciples passing by and the rustling of leaves swaying in the wind, the surroundings were silent. Yao Meng stood on a mountain peak outside the sect, wearing a green skirt that was fluttering in the wind, and said calmly, God of Space, this is the Lianji section, what are you doing here? According to the previous agreement, I promised that I would still openly oppose Dongzhou. Shuiyi walked with sexy steps, as if walking step by step from the void. Her long platinum hair set off her delicate face like ice and snow. She raised her hand and gently threw out a letter. Yao Meng opened the letter and glanced at it, then narrowed his eyes. I will give you 1/3 of Dakian's national fortune in return afterwards. What a generous deal. You don't plan to accept it? If I had planned to accept Gu Boxing's deal, I would not have given this letter to Mr. Mu. Shuiyi showed an elegant smile. Even those in the Hedao realm cannot care less about the destiny of a country, especially for southern wilderness. It's just that I always keep my promises. Since I promised Mr. Mu, I will naturally not go back on my word. Won't you regret it? Yao Meng snorted, and a charming smile bloomed on his beautiful face. If the temptation of the natural furnace was not too great, the dignified god of space would keep his promise so much that he would even bring the fate of a country to attack Dongzhou. Did you miss any chance of luck? Shuiyi smiled and shook her head. Qing Emperor misunderstood. There is no deep hatred between me and Dongzhou. Even if there is no natural furnace, I do not intend to be an enemy of you or Dongzhou. Yao Meng narrowed her beautiful eyes. You didn't tell the truth just now, did you? Shuiyi played with a strand of white blonde hair hanging on her shoulders with her fingertips. She was wearing a pure white dress that was divine and gorgeous, and at her feet was a pair of crystal-colored high heels. Although not much revealing, it is inexplicably alluring. People often say that the fairies in yokai never participate in fights and do not eat the fireworks of the world. It was an eye-opener for me to see them today, Shui Yi said with a hint of amusement in her tone. Yao Meng smiled and said nothing, staring quietly. Okay, I just didn't tell the truth. Shui Yi pondered for a moment, looked at Yao Meng, and said frankly, Mr. Mu's taste is great, so rather than Dakian's national destiny, I want to taste that wonderful spiritual energy again. She originally thought that Yao Meng would be angry when he heard this, but who would have thought that this elegant and refined fairy looked at her with a calm expression. Shui Yi said in surprise, I thought you would be angry. It seems that the fairy's Taoist heart is not so easy to break. Yao Meng chuckled, if you want to taste him again, you can go find him now. Shui Yi snorted, who doesn't know that the formations in Lianji sect are complicated? If you step into it rashly, I'm afraid all this spiritual consciousness will be lost. Are you talking about sect leader Shang? She has no time to talk to you now, Yao Meng said lightly. Shui Yi's eyes flickered, and she heard a huge amount of information from these words. As early as when she was born from the black mist of the southern wilderness, she had heard about concubine Shang Yan, and she had always been wary of the empress of the Lianji sect in Dongzhou. Although the death of the three pillar gods of the southern wilderness seems to have nothing to do with concubine Shang Yan on the surface, if you think about it carefully, in the past, the three pillar gods, the western regions, and a mysterious power from Kyushu all attacked the power of Dongzhou. Concubine Shang Yan, none of them have ever come forward. This is incredible. And the most important thing is, she was trapped in Jiyuan Palace for 10,000 years. A large part of the reason was because of the ingenious formation that trapped her. Looking at the entire Kyushu, only those who can arrange that kind of formation are, only concubine Shang Yan. Although the owner of Jiyuan Palace has nothing to do with concubine Shang Yan, after that incident, Shui Yi became a little more wary of the sect leader in the human world. At this moment, Qing Emperor said that concubine Shang Yan had no time to talk to her for the time being. Does that mean that the Empress was doing something important right now and couldn't even get away? What is it that can keep that sect leader busy? Want to know what she is doing? Yao Meng's heavenly voice sounded as seductive as the devil's whisper in Shui Yi's ears. She couldn't help but look around and narrowed her beautiful eyes. Are you willing to tell me? It's not a secret. It doesn't hurt to tell you, but you need to exchange it for a medicinal plant in the southern wilderness. Trading a medicinal plant for a secret of Shang Yanfei is a good deal no matter how you look at it. Shui Yi stared at Yao Meng and said, as long as it's not an imperial medicine, it's fine. Yao Meng smiled and nodded, that's natural. She paused and said something to Shui Yi. For a moment, Shui Yi's smile completely froze, like a sculpture, as if her soul had been hit hard, so that her red and plump lips slightly opened several times, but she couldn't say a word. That woman was raped by Mr. Mu in Tianhe Garden? How is that possible? Anyone might fall in love with the Tian furnace cauldron, but it was absolutely impossible for her. At this moment, countless thoughts flashed through Shui Yi's mind, and while the two were talking, there seemed to be a faint ice blue light in the distance rushing towards the sect, heading towards Tianhe Garden. And go. Yao Meng inadvertently raised his eyes and glanced. Lan Mulian. Is her inheritance over? Yao Meng stared for a moment, and soon a hint of interest appeared in her eyes. Looking at the woman's still somewhat stunned expression, she smiled and said, don't forget your previous promise, God of Space. After that, she turned and walked towards the direction of Tianhewan. Where are you going? Shui Yi couldn't help her inner curiosity and called her. I'm a little curious about what kind of expression the mysterious big sister will show when she is suppressed, Yao Meng said lightly. Shui Yi looked at the slender back of this fairy and said faintly, your Taoist partner is making out with other women, you don't care at all, and you go to him calmly. Shui put herself in her shoes a little bit. If it were her, I'm afraid it would be difficult to accept that her Taoist partner was making out with other women. Does the Qing Emperor really have such tolerance? It is indeed a complicated feeling to send your Taoist partner away, however, it is not the first time for him to get close to a woman. Even if he gets close to another woman now, what can he do? Don't say they are not Taoist partners. Even if they are, or he still has a lover from his previous life, it doesn't matter. Yao Meng's eyes moved, and a light arc appeared at the corner of her mouth. Anyway, his wife in this life will only be me. Achievement, love of the original witch, possessing the ability to pause the whole world and let time go back. Musian looked at the title that popped up on the personal interface and fell into a brief contemplation. The woman beside the bed occasionally made a few sweet and soft voices, panting slightly, and seemed to have no trace of the past. This is natural, because the spiritual consciousness at this moment is not Shang Yanfei, but the original witch who was previously arrogant. She was careless and did not expect Shang Yanfei to be so cruel that she directly gave up her body and sealed her own furnace. Without the spiritual energy to repair her body, she was naturally exhausted at this moment. Of course, she also felt great satisfaction. Musian didn't know that the spiritual consciousness between the two had been quietly exchanged. At this moment, he was looking at the title on the personal interface and thinking. This love of the original witch, does it refer to the sect master, or the witch's spiritual consciousness in the sect master's body? According to past experience, the titles that appear in the personal interface are all women who have feelings for Musian. Wei Mengru is like this, Bai Ruoxi is like this, and Ye Lingxian and others are the same. But if this achievement is given by the original witch, doesn't it mean that the sect master's sister has no feelings for me? After all, there is no achievement related to the sect master on this human interface. Or is it that the sect master's sister's achievement is more special, and I didn't find the right way to activate it? Musian fell into a brief contemplation. Mu Lang has been staring at this interface since the beginning. What is it? Did you find something? At this time, the pleasant voice of Shang Yanfei came from the side. Musian was holding the slender waist of the sect leader's sister with one hand, smelling the fragrance of her hair, and tapping the personal interface with the other hand from time to time. Hearing her call, Musian also woke up. He was going to perfunctorily pass it over, but at this moment, he suddenly reacted, subconsciously turned his head, and looked at the beauty in his arms in astonishment. What did you call me just now? I said, why have you been staring at the personal interface since just now? I'm so tired and you don't even comfort me. She hugged Musian's arms with both hands, snuggled in his arms and said coquettishly. Musian finally found something wrong. The sect leader's sister is not a person who can act coquettishly. Musian noticed that the beauty in his arms had affectionate eyes and a sweet smile, and he immediately had a guess in his heart. Original witch, Musian hugged the beauty's smooth and delicate body, you have been the dominant one just now. That woman sealed her own furnace and gave her body to me, although I was also worried that you would do too much at the beginning. After all, she is Shang Yanfei, and you still pity her and are quite gentle. The original witch smiled. Musian was stunned, and then he suddenly said, oh. No wonder the voice of the sect leader's sister suddenly became so seductive, and even more proactive. It turned out that she changed her number. Where is she now? Who knows, with her bad taste, maybe she is watching us talking now. When the original witch said this, she was about to say something else. At this time, Musian suddenly felt a slight fluctuation in the formation of Tianhe Garden. Someone stepped into Tianhe Garden. As soon as this thought flashed through Musian's mind, the natural spirit body caught a familiar cold breath. Senior sister? Musian reacted, looked down at the beauty in his arms, and his face changed slightly. Finished. Dividing line Ask for votes. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 493. The next day, early morning. Musian opened his eyes and yawned lazily. The light in the house shone through the window, and the fairy who was still in my arms last night had long since disappeared, and I don't know where she went. After getting out of bed, Musian happened to see Yao Meng sitting at the table. She held a letter in her hand and looked at Musian with a slight smile. "You are really popular." Musian saw a mark of a furnace in the lower right corner of the letter. "That is Yuzhou's cauldron of all things transforming into qi. Sent by Luotan?" Musian looked calm and asked, "Who sent the letter?" "The medicine emperor of Yuzhou. She heard a few days ago that you had returned to the void through spiritual refining, so she wanted to invite you to Yuzhou as a guest for a while, and she even sent this invitation letter." Yao Meng smiled slightly. "Are you planning to go?" "Do you want me to go?" Musian asked. "The medicine emperor is a natural cauldron, and so are you. She will send you an invitation when you return to the void realm." "What exactly does she want?" "The answer is self-evident." Yao Meng raised her eyebrows slightly, put the letter in her hand between her plump breasts, and said with a half-smile, "There were many people who fell in love with the medicine emperor in the past, but no one has ever been favored by the medicine emperor. There are also very few people who know that she is born with a body. She previously helped you refine elixirs to help you achieve the body of a nine-tailed celestial fox. I'm afraid she also took a fancy to your natural furnace, right?" Musian was speechless for a moment. "That's why it's said that it's not a good thing for the women around you to be too smart. Although their intelligence can help you in most situations, their IQs are also stretched when catching an adulterer. Actually, you don't have to deny it. If I wanted to use this matter to punish you, I wouldn't tell you openly." Yao Meng crossed her arms, her slender legs looming under her green gauze skirt. She lowered her eyes slightly. "It is true that you are my husband, but I will not tie you tightly to my side. What's more," she paused slightly and looked at Musian tenderly, "double cultivation with Yao Huang will actually be of great benefit to you. It's nothing if I feel a little wronged." Luo Tan thought she didn't know anything. Maybe she was still enjoying the pleasure of having an affair with Qing Emperor's husband without telling Qing Emperor, and even thought about eating some of this delicious cake after Musian went to Yuzhou. Licking clean bit by bit. But in fact Yao Meng knows everything, but she pretends to know nothing. After all, not only Luo Tan needs a natural cauldron, Musian also needs a natural cauldron, because the spiritual energy that can be obtained from a natural cauldron at the Hedeo realm after dual cultivation is too huge. If Musian and Luo Tan dual cultivate, several times, after receiving the medicine emperor's spiritual charm, he was able to at least advance to a greater realm. Yao Meng has never disliked Musian practicing dual cultivation with others. What he really dislikes is when things are out of his control. For example, after Musian practiced cultivation with Yehuang a few times, she turned into the shape of Yehuang's sister and could never go back. She couldn't accept this. But now, she is confident that even if Musian practices cultivation with Yehuang several times, he will still be in the form of Qingdi's sister. Maybe Yao Huang has been in love for a long time and finally developed feelings for Musian. That would be great. After all, the Empress of Yuzhou still has great green value. You thought she was on the first floor, but actually she was on the 5th floor. Yao Meng's beautiful eyes gazed gently, but her eyes dimmed a bit. "Sometimes I wonder if I am too gentle to you." "I'm sorry." Musian felt a little more apologetic. "If you don't want to, I'll make it clear to her." He walked to Yao Meng's side and reached out to hold her soft little hand. The fairy's mouth could not help but curl up in a slight arc, her eyes were as moist as water, and she gently stretched out her hand to hold the young man in her arms. The soft and snowy touch made people's hearts flutter. She gently stroked Musian's hair and whispered, "It's okay, who asked me to be your Taoist companion?" Musian felt the wonderful touch of facial cleanser and hummed softly. "I couldn't help but sigh in my heart, Sister Kingdi finally started to use tea art." After a while, he suddenly remembered something and asked, "How's it going at the Yaokai Holy Land? If nothing else happens, after Gu Boxing has contacted several allies in Jizhu, it's time to start refining his luck." "I will go to Yaokai today and let the elders get ready," Yao Meng said lightly. Musian nodded slightly and said with a smile, "Then just wait for our Gu Kuashi to put on a good show." After Yao Meng left, Musian left Tianhewen and went to Lianji Peak to meet his senior sister. As soon as he arrived at the main hall, he saw Lin Ling, who was wearing a white dress, sitting boredly in the hall, dangling her feet and holding a meat bun in her hand. A. Sensing Musian's arrival, her eyes instantly lit up. Then he hesitated, broke the meat bun in half, and handed the large portion to him. Musian took it very generously, pretending to be ready to eat it. Lin Ling's red starry eyes looked at him eagerly, with a look of struggle in her eyes. "Just kidding, I'm not hungry, you can eat it." Musian smiled and handed the meat bun to her. Lin Ling immediately took the meat buns happily and took a small bite. Musian glanced at the empty hall, and then lowered his voice, "Ling did you see senior sister when you came here?" AAA Lin Ling nodded obediently. "Have you told her about me and the sect master?" Musian lowered his voice this time, leaned down and whispered into Lin Ling's ear. The slightly hot breath blew gently on her earlobes, and Lin Ling's face soon showed a shy blush. She shook her head gently and wrote in a small notebook, "She said she would handle this matter well, let me I keep it a secret." "Has the sect leader's sister told Ling "Sure enough, she is still very reliable in her work." Musian felt relieved and asked, "Where is senior sister now?" "In the side hall, I am reading a book." Looking at the words written by Lin Ling in the notebook, Musian couldn't help but be slightly startled. "Sister, did you start reading after you came back?" He thought she would be meditating and practicing. After all, she used to spend more time practicing. Walking into the side hall, Musian saw the cold-tempered and elegant senior sister sitting with her legs crossed. Her moon-white dress showed off her exquisite and tight figure. Under her feet was a pair of white shoes that seemed to symbolize purity. Knee boots, looking attentively at the book in his hand. It wasn't until she noticed someone coming in next to her that she glanced sideways, and then quietly placed the book under the table. "Why am I so obsessed with reading books? If I had just arrived in the hall in the past, my senior sister should have noticed it." Musian glanced at the book under the table suspiciously. "Junior brother, a busy man, are you free to come to Lianji Peak today?" Lan Mulian asked in a calm tone with a slight smile on his face. Musian looked back and said with a smile, "I happened to have some insights while practicing yesterday, so I took the opportunity to retreat and took it." Unexpectedly, senior sister came back last night. If I had known this, I would have waited for senior sister to arrive even if I gave up my understanding. Lan Mulian said, "Oh," tapped the edge of the chair with her green fingers, and looked at her junior brother with a half smile. "Are you not having time to see me because you are intimate with a certain woman? So it's not good to say that women are too smart." Musian lamented in his heart, and said without any expression on his face, "How could it be possible? If he was really close to a certain woman, I should have talked to my senior sister last night." Confused, Lan Mulian snorted and glanced sideways at the young man. "That's hard to say. Your psychological quality is far beyond my imagination." Then, she paused and her tone became a little lower. "Have you heard about Master?" Musian's eyes flashed slightly. "Are you referring to the sect leader's business fire?" Lan Mulian nodded silently. "She has been hit by luck several times in the past, and each time it was more serious than the last. It seems that even she can't suppress it this time. If she really can't suppress it in the future." Musian comforted him, the sect leader is able to deduce the secrets of heaven and understand the future in advance. Naturally, he already knows how to deal with it. Senior sister, don't worry too much. Besides, when you went to see her, she seemed to have recovered, right? Lan Mulian is an extremely intelligent woman. After hearing this, her eyes became more thoughtful. Indeed, although she had heard that Master was suffering from the backlash of fate when she came, however, when she visited Master yesterday, she did not see the slightest trace of karmic fire burning on Master, as if the karmic fire had never appeared. Same. Perhaps as the junior brother said, the Master has suppressed the fire of karma himself. It should be said that she is indeed a beauty, even when she is thinking about it, she has different feelings of beauty. Musian looked at the beautiful and refined senior sister and her long, well-proportioned and tight jade legs under her white skirt, and couldn't help but secretly admire her. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught sight of the book sitting under the desk. This is. Musian took out the book from under the desk, turned to the front and took a look. Etc. Lan Mulian woke up from her thoughts and hurriedly reached out to snatch the book in her hand, but it was still a step too late. The overbearing sect master fell in love with me. Musian hesitated for a moment, looking at the burning face of the great beauty in front of him, then opened the book and found that there was a page in the book. The content in the pages of the book happened to be after the plot of the male and female protagonists went through ups and downs. The sect leader confirmed his relationship with his disciple and wanted to get close to him, but was rejected by the disciple because of the disparity in their identities. Further down this section, there is a plot development in which the powerful sect leader tramples his disciples under his feet. Why do you need to add a book page here? Musian looked at Lan Mulian in shock. You can almost see with the naked eye that Lan Mulian's snow-white and delicate face was stained with a faint blush. Her pair of slender legs hidden under the white skirt were slightly close together. She looked away uncomfortably and forced herself to calm down. I just use it to kill time occasionally. Didn't you also say that you planned to lend me a copy before? I'm also curious about the contents, but I didn't expect. She glanced at Musian faintly. There is actually that kind of content in it. Speaking of which, junior brother had this idea from the beginning and asked me to see it, right? Lan Mulian suddenly changed his offensive and began to counter-attack Musian. I haven't read the content in the book. I just heard someone mention it occasionally and said it was very suitable for women to read, so I recommended it to my senior sister, Musian explained. Who? Lan Mulian asked reluctantly. Musian, Sister Mengru. Anyway, Sister Mengru is not here, so I can only feel sorry for her temporarily. Lan Mulian's eyes flashed slightly and she whispered to herself, did you never expect that Miss Wei would be interested in this kind of book? She felt that such a boring story was a waste of time when she first read it, but she couldn't help but want to read it, and even accidentally became fascinated by it. Compared to this, why did senior sister add pages to that part? Do you also like the feeling of a strong sect leader trampling men under his feet? Musian closed the book and put it on the table, and asked with a smile. An unnatural look flashed across Lan Mulian's pretty face, but she forced herself to remain calm and said calmly, I just happened to place the page there and didn't touch it. Compared to this, are you a lot more courageous? In the past, you only dared to stare at my legs secretly, but now you dare to look at them openly. She glanced at the young man next to her, her heart pounding faster, but her tone remained cold. Senior sister was just a senior sister before, so I only had respect for her. Musian took one of Lan Mulian's soft, cold hands and said with a smile, but now, our relationship is no longer an ordinary relationship. Lan Mulian glanced sideways. You have always stared at my legs and swallowed secretly. Is this what junior brother calls respect? If I didn't lust after senior sister before, wouldn't I be denying your charm? Musian spoke righteously. When the time comes, will senior sister ask me again, Am I not attractive at all? That's why you have no interest in me and don't look at me. Lan Mulian was speechless for a moment and could only give Musian a sideways glance. As for the relationship between me and senior sister, now that we are so close, it doesn't matter if we move our hands or something, right? I even think we can try more new ways of playing. Musian leaned into Lan Mulian's ear and whispered something. Her body suddenly froze, her pretty face turned a drunken blush, and there was a hint of disdain in her eyes. Pervert. I just want to satisfy senior sister's hobby. Don't you want to try the plot of the story just now? Musian looked natural, even enjoying the hint of shyness and disdain in senior sister's eyes. The cold beauty's white boots seemed to be touching the ground, making a tuk-tuk sound. Then, she glanced at the young man next to her who had missed her for a long time, and said quietly, I heard Senior Linglong say this morning, Dakian's Imperial Master plans to attack the Imperial Army next. Do you plan to go to Dagon City? Don't worry, let them prepare for a while, Musian said with a smile. The last time Yao Meng let Gu Boxing go, it was because he considered the national destiny of Dakian and did not want people to be ruined. But if Gu Boxing planned to refine the country and refine the national destiny, for your own use. Before that, he must first cast a spell to untie the bond with the national destiny. In this case, there is no reason to let him go. You really feel sorry for Miss Wei, Lan Mulian said quietly, feeling a little jealous. She knew that when he was in the martial arts world, Gu Boxing had tried to bring Wei Mengru, the body of doom, back to Dakian. Even after he failed, he still did not give up. Musian will be resentful of Gu Boxing, probably because of what happened last time. Musian lowered his eyes slightly and said calmly, he should be lucky that Sister Mengru was not injured in those 2 attacks. It is true that Gu Boxing is tied to the fate of the country. If he is willing to spend his life peacefully, that will be fine. But if he is unwilling to be lonely and still wants to give it a try. For the first time, a cold smile appeared on Musian's face. At this time, he suddenly noticed that the side hall seemed to have fallen into a brief silence. He immediately realized something, raised his head and added, of course, if you are senior sister, I will also feel sorry for you. As soon as he finished speaking, Musian suddenly took a breath, and his instep was stepped on by Lan Mulian with his white boot. Looking at Lan Mulian's expressionless look like a queen, he couldn't help but smile, stretched out his hand to take off Lan Mulian's snow-white jade boots, and while massaging her solace, he said, Sister, don't be so cold and sudden next time. Step on other people's toes, of course, if you are willing to accept my proposal just now, I don't mind if you step on. Please beg me. Lan Mulian raised her snow-white chin, condescendingly. Please, senior sister, Musian begged sincerely. Lan Mulian was silent for a long time due to Musian's shamelessness. She felt the gentle pressure of the young man's palm. Her cold and beautiful face was quickly stained with a faint blush, and then there was a hint of redness on his face. Under the expectant gaze, the disdain in his eyes gradually turned into an inexplicable joy. Try it again next time you're in a good mood, she said softly. Although I had known for a long time that my senior sister had a vague intention of being a domineering female CEO, but I didn't expect that she actually woke up. Sensing the joy in Lan Mulian's eyes, Musian couldn't help but sigh inwardly. At the same time, I took a sip of tea and enjoyed the leisurely time. Next is a big plot, which I personally think is quite fun. I originally wanted to finish it tonight, but I still overestimated my hand speed. In order to avoid procrastination, I will finish it in one go tomorrow. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 494. Dakian Dynasty. In the tall and majestic palace, there is a rather gorgeous Taoist temple with several alchemy furnaces and countless medicinal materials. Over the years, Gu Boxing, the national preceptor, secretly collected a lot of medicinal materials on the grounds that His Majesty practiced Taoism. Because of this matter, there was a lot of discussion among the civil and military officials of the court, because a large part of the official silver that was supposed to be used for disaster relief and even the spiritual stones given to the monks were used to refine elixirs for Gu Boxing. It's just that the emperor of the current dynasty is now devoted to cultivating Taoism, fighting against all opinions and turning a deaf ear to the objections of the courtiers. Every half a month, he sends people to deliver heavenly materials and earthly treasures collected from Dongzhou. The old emperor was too old to enter the world of immortality. He could only long to extend his life by making alchemy. In the Taoist temple, a middle-aged man wearing a Taoist robe sat cross-legged in front of the table and looked at the bamboo slips in his hands quietly. He looks like an ordinary person, oh, rather, he is indeed an ordinary person now. A grain of sand falling from the top of the world of immortality is like a huge stone to the monks at the bottom. King Di's purifying green lotus sealed his cauldron, so at this moment Gu Boxing is indeed no different from ordinary people. But no matter what happens, he still has the blessing of Dakian's national luck and the will of all living beings. After all, he is not comparable to ordinary people. Gu Boxing, the national preceptor. The life of this national master is not legendary, but at least it is far beyond the average of most people. He was alone when he was a child, and was later adopted by a mysterious strong man. When he was a child, Gu Boxing relied solely on brute force and had no knowledge of astrology. When he grew up, Gu Boxing was also a vulgar martial artist, coming from the same sect as the current first master of Tianji Peak. The brothers all thought that this person was a strange person, because their master was a master of discerning heavenly secrets. As a result, one of the disciples taught by his master did not even understand astrology. In order to be able to embark on the path of Hedao as soon as possible, after the death of his master, Gu Boxing parted ways with his fellow disciples. At the age of 30, he returned to the void through spiritual practice, and later came to the Sea of World by chance. There he received a trace of the inheritance left by the original witch. At this point, Gu Boxing transformed from a warrior and understood the method of deducing the secrets of heaven. Then, he chose the shortcut of national preceptor. For Gu Boxing, his pursuit has been only one from the beginning, and that is Hedao. Dakian's status as imperial master is just a tool he uses to speed up this pace. After all, cultivation requires a lot of resources. Joining the ancient family and being manipulated by others is far less comfortable than the current national master. Moreover, he has been to the western regions before and knows how to use the power of all living beings' wishes to bless his body. Report. In the distance, a spy in black quickly walked into the Taoist temple, knelt on his knees and presented several secret letters. Gu Boxing reached out and took the secret letter, opened it one by one, and glanced at it. The first secret letter was written about the Yaokai Holy Land. That Holy Land seemed to have discovered the movement in the Dakian dynasty, so it secretly sent people to follow it early. The second secret letter was about the response from the southern wilderness. Not surprisingly, the god of space accepted this generous proposal. The third secret letter was sent from Yunzhou. King Di's strength was overwhelming. If he could take this opportunity to suppress Dongzhou's luck, Yunzhou would be happy to help. The fourth and fifth secret letters were sent from the western region and the northern territory, and their contents are self-evident. The imperial master really has a clever plan. The Qing emperor is too strong. I thought that the Lord of the Sword Palace would compete with her after she ascended to heaven, but I didn't expect that the relationship between the two seemed to be pretty good. Other forces would not want to see this kind of thing. The scene appears. Opposite Gu Boxing, the old emperor who had just finished swallowing his breath opened his eyes and spoke slowly. Ascension is not only a deterrent and pressure for us, but also for other forces. If they have the opportunity to make a profit, they will naturally not let this opportunity go. Gu Boxing smiled. However, they thought they were using us, but little did they know, it was us who was using them. Are you sure? Although the old emperor was devoted to cultivating Taoism, he was not stupid. He knew that with Gu Boxing's strength, it would be very difficult to find a hope of survival in these struggles. To be honest, I don't have the confidence to refine the destiny of the country. Gu Boxing gently stroked the bamboo slips on the table, and then placed it in front of the old emperor. But with this opportunity, the Qing emperor has a lot of confidence in having to remove this pure green lotus from my body. The old emperor narrowed his eyes slightly and slowly opened the bamboo slips on the desk. The eunuch beside him took one look and immediately lowered his head with great respect. The sun gradually moved westward, turning the entire royal city into orange. Princess Yongning was walking in the royal city wearing a gorgeous long dress. She had delicate feet in a pair of exquisite embroidered shoes, and her golden steps swayed gently as she walked gracefully. She looked up at the plaque written on the hall in front of her, which showed 3 characters, Jixian Pavilion. There were 2 guards at the door who were responsible for guarding the collection of books. When they saw the arrival of the eldest princess, they immediately cheered up and took the initiative to greet her. Princess Yongning, why are you here? Could it be that you have some books you want to read recently? The books in the Dacian dynasty include a large number of ancient books that are not available in the outside world. Many of these ancient books were left behind after the collapse of other dynasties in the past. Yongning has always been interested in books. She has been well read since she was young, and she has read a lot of ancient books in her spare time. It is for this reason that she has such a good relationship with the owner of the library. Princess Yongning smiled and shook her head. I just came in for a stroll when I have nothing to do. You don't have to care. After she finished speaking, she walked into the Jixian pavilion with the maid, and her eyes casually swept across the bookshelves full of antiques. Then, she asked casually, has anyone come here to borrow books recently? One of the guards behind her thought for a while and said, Concubine Lin came here to borrow a book about women's virtues a few days ago. In addition, 2 princes also borrowed a few books of poetry. The prince has been here before, but he borrowed those. Before the guard finished speaking, he was gently pushed by his companion with his elbow. He suddenly came to his senses and lowered his head. I deserve to die, I deserve to die. There is no one else here. You don't have to be so reserved. I won't tell anyone else about what happened today. Princess Yongning said indifferently, no one else has come here except the prince. The current emperor has elixirs made by the national teacher Gu Boxing, so his lifespan is far longer than that of ordinary people. Although the prince is the master of the East Palace, his father has no intention of giving up the throne. It doesn't make any difference whether the prince does it or not. Over time, the prince gradually became addicted to beauty. The 2 guards just said that the prince came to borrow books, which are probably books related to beauty. The 2 guards were moved. In this palace, the servants like Princess Yongning more. Many people are vying to be servants in Yongning Palace. The reason is that this eldest princess is approachable. And, the imperial master has been here once. With Princess Yongning's words, the 2 guards did not hide anything and spoke again. Princess Yongning became interested. The imperial master rarely borrowed books from Jixian Pavilion in the past. What did he borrow? I heard that it was a bamboo slip that has been circulated for a long time. It records some major events that shook the 9 states in the past, said the guard. Noticing the interest in the eyes of the eldest princess, the guard asked tentatively, if your highness is interested, I will bring it to you now. The sample of the bamboo slip is still in Jixian Pavilion. Yes, Princess Yongning smiled. After a while, the guard presented the bamboo slip to Yongning. Princess Yongning gestured to the maid beside her, and the maid took out 2 bags of spirit stones and placed them in the hands of the 2 guards. Don't tell anyone about what happened today. Just pretend that I have never been here. Do you understand? The two guards were delighted and responded quickly. Yongning took the bamboo slips and left Jixian pavilion, then whispered to the maid beside her, "Send someone to deliver the bamboo slips to Lianji sect tonight, and make sure it is delivered to Pavilion Master Yan within 3 days. In addition, let her tell Musian a message." Princess Yongning said lightly, "Gu Boxing is building a 7-color altar." The maid looked at the eldest daughter of the emperor in shock. Even if she was the confidant of the princess, she couldn't understand what her master was thinking at the moment. The national teacher wanted to refine the country in the Dogon dynasty and transform the national destiny and the will of all living beings into his own power. This would undoubtedly damage the fate of Dongzhou. Once it was known, the Dogon dynasty would face a catastrophe. In the past, the ancient family had never moved this dynasty. On the one hand, it was because there were powerful cultivators in the dynasty, and it was blessed with luck. On the other hand, moving the Dogon dynasty would affect the fate of the entire Dongzhou. Once the national destiny of Dogon was damaged, the luck of the cultivators in Dongzhou would be more or less affected. Under such circumstances, Gu Boxing still wanted to refine the national destiny for his own use. If it really succeeded, he would be free from the sky and the monks would have no way to deal with him. But once the matter was exposed in advance, it would be a great disaster. "Princess." Yongning shook his head gently and said softly, "Do as I say." 3 days later, Musian was invited to the library and met the owner of the library in a garden not far behind. She was wearing a plain tube-top skirt and her makeup was more inclined to the intellectual temperament of being well educated. If it were placed in modern times, Musian felt that if Yan Ruyu wore black-framed glasses and held the documents for preparing lessons, she would be a proper teacher. After Yan Ruyu invited Musian to take a seat, he looked at his nominal master in the sect for a few more times and said with a smile, "The pavilion master looks much better than before. It seems that he has made progress in cultivation." After Yan Ruyu poured tea for Musian, she smiled and said, "The rules of the world today are different from the past. In the past, the spiritual energy between heaven and earth did not allow the existence of cultivators in the enlightenment realm, so the cultivation speed would be much slower, but now it is very different." Musian nodded. He could not see through Yan Ruyu's current realm at all. If she was in the return to void realm, which was similar to his realm, he could roughly judge the other party's strength with his natural spiritual body. "I came to you today because of a bamboo slip sent by Princess Yongning and the words she asked me to bring to you." Yan Ruyu said concisely, "She asked me to tell you that Gu Boxing is building a colorful altar." Musian took the bamboo slip and flipped through it, and asked doubtfully, "Colorful altar?" He became more curious. If the guess is correct, since Gu Boxing has secretly contacted Nanhuang and other places for help, he must not be willing to sit back and wait for death, and will definitely find a way to fight for this last chance. However, the colorful altar used to be used for sacrifices. Why did Gu Boxing build an altar at this juncture? Could it be that Gu Boxing had a grudge against him, and because he didn't know what the outcome would be, he planned to use a curse to trade with him? This may not be the case. However, after the dream-killing technique was easily resolved last time, Gu Boxing should know that this technique is useless. In this way, the thing that can be related to the colorful altar is probably related to the jade slip sent by Princess Yongning. According to what is said in the bamboo slips, in the early days of ancient times, there was an existence that was suspected of being a quasi-immortal. Her strength was so powerful that it made the heavens tremble, so much so that the heavens almost broke the rules of heaven and earth and forcibly died together with the quasi-immortals. It's just that the quasi-immortal sympathized with all living beings and didn't want the battle between heaven and her to cause the destruction of all life in the 9 provinces, so she used the entire 9 provinces as a formation to seal her true body somewhere in the 9 provinces, and she fell into a long sleep. After bidding farewell to Yan Ruyu for the time being, Musian sat in the courtyard of Tianhe Garden and read the bamboo slips, but he only felt a little absurd. "Sister Mengru, Do you think the records here are credible? Musian gathered his thoughts, threw the bamboo slips on the table, and then looked at Wei Mengru beside him and asked. Wei Mengru shook her head gently. I don't believe it. She paused, but I think Gu Boxing won't build an altar for no reason. It's better to be careful. Colorful altars are generally used for sacrifices in Kyushu, and some evil cultivators also use them to summon dead souls. Gu Boxing had used special spells in the past to summon a ray of spiritual consciousness from the original witch. That's true, but there's one more thing I'm curious about. Musian looked at the bamboo slips on the table and whispered, who compiled this record? This bamboo slip is made of Arab bamboo and will not decay even if it is kept for 10,000 years. From this inference, write down the person in this record was at least tens of thousands of years ago. Why did this bamboo slip finally appear in the Dakian dynasty? The Dakian dynasty was built on the ruins of countless dynasties. This bamboo slip has been kept in the library of those dynasties since the past. Because it is not easy to damage, it is not difficult to save it, Wei Mengru said lightly. How does Sister Mengru know so much? Musian glanced at Wei Mengru, and when he noticed a ray of silver light flowing in her beautiful eyes, he understood slightly. Did the Witch of Love and Desire tell you? Wei Mengru hummed softly. The Desire Witch just returned to her cauldron 2 days ago, and just after her return, she merged with the spiritual consciousness of another original witch. The current original witch's strength is unfathomable and is not even affected by heaven and earth. Rule constraints. So, the records in this bamboo slip are probably true. Musian looked at the bamboo slips and pondered. What's wrong? What did you think of? It should be said that she was indeed the maid who had always been by Musian's side. Seeing that Musian was silent, Wei Mengru knew what Musian was thinking and immediately asked. Sister Mengru, do you feel that the records here are somewhat similar to some things we have heard before? Musian suddenly asked softly. The quasi-immortal in the early days of the ancient times was a taboo creature that frightened Kyushu. He was feared by heaven, and then sealed himself. Just being a quasi-immortal is enough to make all this information seem ridiculous. Musian's first reaction when he saw the bamboo slips was that he thought it was ridiculous. But after thinking about some of the things he had experienced in the past, Musian thought of a possibility. Wei Mengru's eyes flickered and she looked up at Musian. You mean, the other me sealed deep in the southern wilderness? Musian nodded slightly. He still remembers the shocking scene he saw in the black box cave. The way of heaven transformed its origin into a sharp arrow, pierced the chest of the original witch, and suppressed her in the depths of the southern wilderness, causing the southern wilderness to be filled with black mist all year round. Wherever the black mist passed, all living things were wiped out. Gu Boxing built the altar for her? Just as Musian was thinking about it, at this moment, the formation fluctuations suddenly came from outside Tianhe Garden. It's Lingxian and the others, Sister Mengru, go and pick them up. Musian sensed the person coming, raised his brows slightly, turned to look at Wei Mengru and said. I'm afraid they have just returned to the sect, right? Their whole hearts are really tied to you. Wei Mengru cast a disdainful glance at the young master, turned around and left the courtyard with light steps. After a while, 2 girls appeared in the field of vision. One was wearing a classic and exquisite purple dress, with a little makeup on her face, showing a bit of girlish innocence. Yechian was wearing a light blue skirt, looking at Musian with watery eyes, holding a snack box in her hand. This is the snack that my sister and I made for Brother Mu before we came here. Brother Mu can taste it when he is tired from practicing. She came to Musian's side, her face slightly red, and placed the spiritual cake mixed with some medicinal materials in front of the table. The monks in the realm of refining gods have already reached the level of fasting, and they can naturally eat or not eat food. But it's actually quite good to satisfy your cravings and relax your body and mind once in a while. Just like a certain natural food dragon, even though he has reached the Taoist realm, he still thinks about snacks every day. Although the young master can eat a lot of snacks every day, I still thank you for your kindness. The black-bellied maid showed a bright smile like breaking the ice, and said in a cold voice. During this period of time, Ye Lingxian was not in the sect, and Lan Feiying was still in seclusion in the ancestral land, and she didn't know how unbridled the young master was. Although she didn't care who the young master was intimate with, she still had to remind the sisters, this guy is very fickle, don't forget it. Ye Lingxian was a very smart girl. Upon hearing this, she immediately looked at Musian suspiciously. Brother Mu is in the sect every day, where does he get snacks? Musian coughed lightly. Senior Linglong occasionally brings me some snacks when he comes back from foraging. Ye Lingxian pursed her lips and glanced at the boy. Senior Linglong treats Brother Mu very well, but he won't give all her snacks to you, right? Musian was silent for a moment. Well, senior sister occasionally brings me some cakes. It's not just as simple as bringing cakes. Senior sister Lan has been interested in Brother Mu. Ye Qian looked at Musian with sparkling eyes. I'm afraid she did something else after delivering the cakes. How can Sister Qianer be so imaginative? Musian said helplessly. By the way, why didn't Senior Ye see it? Didn't she come back with you? After my mother learned that we were in the Ye clan, she sent people to Tianqian City to invite our ancestors to visit the forbidden area. Considering that we would also go to the forbidden area later, she went to meet several old acquaintances in advance. When Ye Lingxian said this, there was a hint of helplessness in her eyes. After the forbidden area was separated from the Ye clan, she watched the Ye clan decline but did not take action. Although Ye Qingxin did not express dissatisfaction with the forbidden area in her words, it was inevitable that some trouble would arise when she went to the forbidden area this time. He diverted the subject again. Wei Mengru looked at the scene silently and couldn't help but give Musian a squint. The young master is not good at other things, but the way to divert attention is getting more and more skilled. But Ye Lingxian didn't know that during the time when the young master left the sect, not only Linglong, but even his relationship with the sect master was unclear. This forbidden area princess looked like an elegant lady on weekdays, but in fact, she was very possessive. Once she became the queen of the forbidden area in the future, she knew that her beloved brother Mu had secretly multi-threaded operations without her knowledge and raised several great white sharks. By then, Ye Lingxian might not be the well-behaved girl who would snuggle in Musian's arms and sweetly call Brother Mu. After all, apart from the Lianji sect, the forbidden area is the most profound force. If you really want to take someone away quietly, it's not difficult. But she was too lazy to remind the young master. Anyway, no matter where he was, she could find him. Ye Lingxian naturally didn't know what Wei Mengru was thinking. At this moment, she heard Musian praising the deliciousness of the cakes and noticed his burning eyes. She felt a little shy for a while and completely forgot what happened just now. Qianer and I will go to Daofeng to tell Master later, so we won't bother Brother Mu for now. After saying that, Ye Lingxian put down the food box and took her sister's hand and left. Sister Mengru, I seem to be one step closer to my dream of having a gigolo. Musian looked at the beautiful backs of the two girls and sighed in his heart. Sister Lingxuan's breasts seem to have grown a lot. This is your dream, eat it. Wei Mengru opened the food box, the fragrance of the spiritual cake drifted in the air, and wisps of sunset light quietly appeared in front of her. If a mortal ate such a cake, his lifespan could be extended by at least 10 years. It is enough to imagine that the ingredients of the cake were prepared by Ye Lingxian, a little rich woman. Sister Lingxian and Sister Qianer seem to have good cooking skills. Sister Mengru, why don't you ask them for advice someday and make it for me next time? Musian picked up a piece of cake from the food box and tasted it, and then couldn't help but exclaimed. Wei Mengru glanced at him. If you like it so much, why don't you let them do it for you every day? Oh, maybe you can have it every day when you go to the restricted area next time. Wei Mengru paused and added, in the basement. Musian looked at Wei Mengru unexpectedly and couldn't help laughing. Sister Mengru is jealous. No matter what, you are the only maid around me, and this will not change. I'm not jealous, I'm explaining a possibility, Wei Mengru said silently in her heart. There are too many things that happened during the time when Musian left the section. If Ya Lingxian knew about them one by one, it might not matter. But if these things are mixed together and then exploded at once. For example, tell the reincarnation of the reincarnated queen that your brother Mu had sex with Ling Long, the daughter of the great Dao. At this time, Ya Lingxian would be a little shocked, but she couldn't bear it. Then she took the opportunity to add, not only that, your brother Mu also suppressed the sister of the sect master whom you respect and admire in your heart. By the way, your sister Buff is gone, because he also suppressed your senior sister Lan and your sister Fei Ying. When he went to the demon world before, he was raped by the demon queen. Well, it seems that if she wants, she can kill the young master now. Wei Mengru looked at the young master who seemed to be smug while tasting the cakes, and couldn't help but pursed her lips to avoid the sneer that she couldn't help showing. Sister Mengru, please help me deliver a cake to Lianji Peak later. As soon as Musian finished speaking, he looked at Wei Mengru in surprise. What's wrong? You're smiling so weirdly. He always felt that the maid was up to something bad. That's why you smile so weirdly. Wei Mengru glanced at the young master lightly. If Gu Boxing built the altar really to summon her, are you going to stop it? There's no rush. Musian handed the food box to Wei Mengru and couldn't help but smile. Let's play with him first. This is equivalent to 3 updates, please vote for me. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 495. For Musian, although Gu Boxing is not a treasure hunting mouse, he has replaced the position of the treasure hunting mouse in a sense. Last time, Gu Boxing was seriously injured in order to summon the spirit of the original witch. And this time, he seems to be planning to send a big wave again. If it weren't for the secret letter sent by Princess Yongning, I probably wouldn't have thought that someone would set their sights on the original witch in the depths of the southern wilderness. Musian sighed in his heart. The black fog in the southern wilderness is difficult to approach, and even he can only jump over the black fog with the help of the black box and step directly into the depths of the black fog. The original witch's true body in the depths of the southern wilderness is sealed by the arrow of heaven, and even Musian can't rescue her now. Not to mention rescuing her, Musian even felt as if he was about to be purified by the arrow of heaven when he approached the original witch. If Gu Boxing can really use some magic to summon the original witch, it would be perfect. After all, he had harvested leeks like Yayu and Xiaohua before, so Musian naturally knew what to do to maximize the benefits of this rare leek before harvesting it. Now the only thing that Musian cares about is whether Gu Boxing can ignore the seal of the arrow of heaven and summon the original witch in the depths of the southern wilderness. If he can really do it, the value of this treasure hunting rat is really immeasurable. To the north of the Dogon dynasty, there is a mountain called Liangxin Mountain. Some time ago, Gu Boxing sent people to build a colorful altar in Liangxin Mountain. In the name of praying for the country, hoping that the Dogon dynasty will have good weather and good harvests, but in fact, he is secretly planning other ideas. And in the morning of the day after 7 days, the Dogon dynasty ushered in a carnival. As early as about 10 days ago, Gu Boxing had someone release the news that he would go to Liangxin Mountain to pray for the country and pray that the dynasty would have good weather and good harvests next year. Most people in the mortal world do not know the true face of this national teacher, so they naturally admire this national teacher. However, they obviously do not know that the so-called prayer is false, and refining the national destiny in the name of prayer is the real thing. Are all the things ready? Gu Boxing slowly opened his eyes and asked the Taoist boy beside him in a calm tone. The colorful altar has been set up on the top of Liangxin Mountain. The great powers in the South Wilderness, the western regions and other places have secretly set up magic arrays in Liangxin Mountain not long ago, Waiting for the good news that the master has refined the national destiny, the Taoist boy said. Very good. Gu Boxing showed a satisfied smile on his face, and felt that the anger accumulated in his heart during this period of time had dissipated a lot at once. He was really too angry during this period of time. The furnace was sealed, and His Majesty's trust in him was not as good as before. As a powerful national teacher, how could he have thought that he would suffer such humiliation today? He did not even offend the Green Emperor at the beginning, but just wanted to take away the maid next to Musian. That maid is a body of misfortune, which will affect the fate of the dynasty. He wants to confirm what the problem is. And all this is because of the little cultivator named Musian. Even for him now, Musian is just an ant. Even if Musian practices for another 10 years, he may not be able to catch up with his current achievements. As a result, there is a person like King Di behind this ant. Even the original which he summoned in the past seems to have an unclear relationship with Musian. How can a little cultivator in the realm of refining spirit stand at the pinnacle of life? In addition to sweet talk to make women happy, what else can he do? Gu Boxing, who has always been calm, finds it difficult to balance and even angry when he thinks of Musian's existence. Most cultivators practice for immortality and to have a place in this 9 states where the weak are the prey of the strong. Musian was born with all of this. Although Musian's strength is not strong, the woman behind him can give him everything he wants. Although some cultivators in Jiuzhu seem to be disdainful of soft rice, with an attitude that we cultivators should be self-reliant, if there is a female emperor who is obedient as a wife, I am afraid that they will hug her legs and not let go on the spot. Gu Boxing is naturally the same. Therefore, he will feel particularly unbalanced. Moreover, his furnace was sealed because of Musian. The source of everything started with Musian, and now it should naturally end with Musian. Refining the national destiny is bound to be noticed by the Qing Emperor. Whether the great powers in Jiuzhu will be willing to help with all their strength is still unknown, but at least, the formation they set up before can last for a while. And this period of time is enough for him to awaken the real immortal. Musian, this is your own fault, don't blame me. Gu Boxing's face became a little colder. It was still unknown whether he could use the national destiny to unlock the seal of the pure world Blue Lotus, and Musian was blessed by the Green Emperor, so it was impossible for him to take revenge. So the only method he could think of was the soul calling technique. This secret method was obtained from the inheritance of the original witch in the past in the world sea. Every time this secret method was used, the spiritual energy of the furnace would be reduced by 20%, and it would never recover. This time, everyone, including the Emperor Dagan, probably thought that he, Gu Boxing, was just doing this to refine the national destiny and unlock the seal of the Green Emperor's pure world Blue Lotus. But who would have thought that, from the very beginning, his real purpose was not for himself? If he could rescue the quasi-immortal in the depths of the southern wilderness, Musian could rely on a powerful person, and he could do the same at that time. Although he might have to sacrifice more than 20% of his spiritual energy this time, Gu Boxing didn't care about that now. Anyway, the furnace has been sealed. If it continues like this, his blood will be exhausted, and when he can't even perform the soul calling technique, he will really be helpless. Only by taking advantage of the will of all living beings to cast spells, awaken the quasi-immortal, and remove the seal on her body, can he have a glimmer of hope. With all the spiritual energy in my furnace and the will of all living beings, with the help of the power of heaven and earth, it should not be difficult to awaken or even remove the seal on her body. That afternoon, Gu Boxing set out for Liangxin Mountain, attracting the attention of countless civilians and monks living in the city along the way, and they were all talking about something. The masses are ignorant, but there are also smart people among them. They know that the Qing Emperor sealed Gu Boxing's furnace when he was clearing up the dynasty in the past, and this matter has also aroused many people's associations. After all, the status of Yaokai Holy Land in Dongzhou is very important. The Qing Emperor used to protect Dongzhou and suppress the first generation of demon kings. That fairy is a synonym of holiness in the hearts of countless people in Dongzhou. They naturally believe that the Qing Emperor will not vent his anger on the national teacher for no reason. I think this national teacher has done something, so he was cleared up by the Qing Emperor. At this moment, Gu Boxing stood in front of the mountain top, with his hands behind his back, looking up at the colorful altar in front of him, and said with a little satisfaction, "You did a good job. Next, no one is allowed to enter without my order." After he finished speaking, he drove all the people in Liangzin Mountain out of the mountain top, and then placed several precious medicinal herbs in strict positions around the colorful altar according to the Western region's Buddhism he knew. Then he sat cross-legged in front of the colorful altar, chanting complicated Buddhist teachings. These materials are all very precious, but what is more precious is the will of all living beings that Gu Boxing began to guide out of his body. This is a secret method that he accidentally learned from a monk in the Western regions in the past. The cultivation methods in the Western regions are very special. Some of the monks who have achieved enlightenment are only in the realm of refining spirits, but their combat power is comparable to that of returning to the void. The reason for this is the blessing of this will of all living beings. As long as the people in that area believe in a certain monk, that monk can collect the will of all living beings and bless himself. The more people believe, the greater the will of all living beings. According to Gu Boxing's guess, if the will of all living beings in the entire Western regions is gathered, its combat power can at least double or triple. Boom! The sky began to gradually darken, and a dark cloud in the distance was slowly moving towards this direction. Not long after, several strange runes emerged on the altar, and the will of all living beings on the top of the entire Liangzin mountain became extremely strong. If a cultivator rashly stepped into it at this time, he would probably explode and die in a while. Because such a surging wish power of all living beings cannot be directly absorbed, and even completely dissipates the nearby spiritual energy. Next, it is to inject the huge national destiny into the altar. Gu Boxing's forehead began to gradually ooze out cold sweat. His furnace is now sealed, and now he is completely using the wish power of all living beings to perform this secret method and refine the national destiny. This approach has great side effects, not to mention that he has to hide this secret method as much as possible to avoid being discovered too early. Sure enough, for me now, this method of refining qi is still too difficult, but I have no choice. Gu Boxing gritted his teeth, raised his hand through his chest, and slowly took out a ball of light emitting purple light. This ball of light began to slowly spread, filling the entire world. 1/3 of the national destiny. Gu Boxing breathed a sigh of relief, and then he slowly stretched out his hand and was about to start refining. However, at this moment, he suddenly felt a green light flashing before his eyes. Then, a green lotus quietly bloomed in the air, and the vast and infinite spiritual energy fluctuations were emitted, as if the sky was directly pressing down, causing the spiritual energy of the entire space to produce violent fluctuations and explosions. Gu Boxing's face changed slightly. Green Emperor. In the air, I don't know when it started. The woman in the green gauze skirt stepped on the void step by step. Every step seemed to be accompanied by the humming of the avenue, like the nine heavens' mysterious woman descending to the earth. She looked down at the man on the top of the mountain from a high place, and her red lips opened slightly. Gu Boxing, I thought of your past contributions to protecting Dogon and cultivating the national destiny, so I spared your life. But it seems that you are still unwilling to be lonely. Dogon's national destiny is related to the fate of Dongzhou, and it cannot be used for your own selfish interests. This fairy sound was like a heavenly sound, slowly ringing in the entire Dogon dynasty, like a stone stirring up 1,000 layers of waves, making countless people change color. The soldiers in Liangzin Mountain were even more shocked. When they looked up, they couldn't help but reveal a deep sense of awe. Kingdi. In the darkness, The eyes of several powerful people who were secretly watching here were a little more trembling. They still underestimated the difference between the Yahua realm and the Hedeo realm. The last time King Di killed a Buddha in the western region, several powerful people including Yunzo believed that it was because King Di activated some secret method, and the Buddha did not have the blessing of the will of all living beings, so he achieved a shocking scene of killing with one blow. But now they saw the aura emanating from King Di's body when he arrived, and they realized how big the difference was between Yahua and Hedeo. The Hedeo realm that is not restricted by the rules of heaven and earth can be so terrifying. Why did Emperor Qing come to Liangxin Mountain? In the mountain peak, a group of Dacian soldiers looked at this scene, and finally couldn't help lowering their voices and asked, "What do you mean by what King Di just said? The national master is seeking his own personal gain." Someone quickly reacted and couldn't help lowering their voices to discuss what King Di had just said. At this moment, there were many whispers not only in Liangxin Mountain, but also in the entire Dacian dynasty. All the monks were terrified. Although the fairy voice was melodious and intoxicating, every word she spoke contained a Taoist rhyme that made people resonate with her, as if their souls were trembling. "Qing Emperor, you are indeed here." Although Gu Boxing was shocked, it seemed as if he was still sitting cross-legged as expected, because now he had reached the critical moment to start refining the national destiny, and it was impossible to stop halfway. "You are much calmer than I thought. Do you have any trump cards that you can prepare in advance?" Yao Meng smiled indifferently, her beautiful blue eyes as clear as glass, and her voice was always soft and gentle, but in Gu Boxing's ears, he could clearly hear the murderous intention in her words. The last time the Qing Emperor held back, it was because the destiny of the country was bound to him, and it was not worth damaging the destiny of the country by killing him. But now he took out the destiny of the country and poured it into the colorful altar with the intention of refining it. The Emperor Qing may not hold back this time. However, instead of being afraid, Gu Boxing showed an interesting smile. "I bet you can't kill me." After refining the national destiny, he can fulfill his previous promises with Yunzhou, Nanhuang, Western region, and other places and hand over part of the national destiny to them. During this period, he would also secretly awaken the quasi-immortal sleeping deep in the southern wilderness. He had deduced the secret before and knew the sleeping position of the quasi-immortal who was sealed. Once he wakes her up, he will naturally have a chance of survival. Fellow Taoists, what are you waiting for? Now is the time to stop King Di. Gu Boxing shouted into the air, and his voice spread to all directions through the power of the will of all living beings. And almost the moment he finished speaking, the space under the sky was distorted like a black hole. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. Immediately afterwards, a woman wearing a white dress slowly walked out of the space. The iconic platinum hair rested gently on the seductive shoulders. Behind him, there was an extremely bright light, and a huge body of the avenue appeared, as if it contained the laws of space. God of space, She. Many people were a little confused. They didn't expect that a sacrifice and prayer would actually attract the current master of Nanhuang. As expected of the God of space, the speed of his arrival is indeed much faster than other powers. A faint smile appeared on Gu Boxing's face and he said, "Then please, Master Shui, stop the Qing Emperor first." Before he finished speaking, he noticed that Shui's eyes were always staring in a certain direction, and there seemed to be a brilliance in her beautiful eyes. Gu Boxing was stunned for a moment, and when he followed that gaze, his pupils shrank slightly. It was a young man wearing a luxurious black robe. He had been standing in mid-air for some time. The maid in a yellow skirt stood coldly not far from him. Musian. "Senior Shui, why did you go all the way? I thought you would just stop coming." Under Gu Boxing's incredibly dull gaze, Musian showed a gentle smile and said hello. You. This scene made Gu Boxing stunned. After realizing something, his blood almost surged and he spurted out a mouthful of blood. At this moment, Gu Boxing, who was good at deducing secrets, felt the anger of being betrayed. The god of space broke his promise and didn't even care about Dakian's national destiny. How is this possible? Even a powerful person in the Hedeo realm cannot care about the destiny of the country. The anger in Gu Boxing's eyes gradually turned into calmness. Fortunately, he knew how powerful Qing Emperor was, so he was well prepared this time and did not just contact Nanhuang secretly. Fellow Taoists, how long will it take if we don't take action now? Gu Boxing roared in the air. And no response. Yao Meng's brows softened and she said quietly, "It seems that the powerful experts you have secretly contacted are not very reliable." She originally wanted to take this opportunity to fight with these people to see which continent the powerful man who secretly attacked her in Yaokai's ancestral land was from, but it seemed that the other party was still careful enough, and even the national destiny could not be controlled. The other party fished it out. In other words, even if you deliberately restrain yourself in the Ascension realm, you are still fearful. Yao Meng's eyes swept around casually and said softly, "The Buddha in the western region, the princess in Yunzhou, and the lord of the underworld in the north? What is the purpose of these people coming to Dongzhou for no reason?" Qing Emperor seems to be very confident in his current strength, and he really has the airs to look down on all living beings. A cold snort came from Yunzhou. The voice seemed to be that of a woman. Her voice was very cold. She must have been the princess in Yao Meng's mouth. Amitabha, Donor Yao and the poor monk just saw someone trying to refine the national destiny and harm Dongzhou, so they came here to stop it. In mid-air, a Buddha's light suddenly shone. The sacred light shrouded the entire land, causing many people to almost kneel on the ground and convert to Buddhism. At this time, Yao Meng suddenly raised his fingertips, surrounded by fairy energy, and a green lotus appeared in the air floating in the air. Almost at that moment, the Buddha's light disappeared, and the entire space seemed to be under the control of the purifying green lotus. Chaos rose and fell, as if it could purify everything in the world into nothingness. The Buddha's expression finally changed. In the void, the princess and the lord of the underworld were also looking at the scene with uncertainty. Although they knew that the strength of the Ascension realm reached the sky, the Qing Emperor's casual blow seemed to contain the laws of heaven and earth, which was really amazing. "Do you guys have anything else to do?" Yao Meng asked calmly. In the void, the fluctuations that originally exuded a faint aura of terror quietly subsided. Musian looked along and saw the three supreme beings from different continents. The Lord of Hades in the north is a man who looks extremely tall, and his body seems to exude the aura of death. There is a golden light behind the Buddha's head, making it difficult to see its shape. As for the princess, he could only see the graceful curves of the woman's back in gauze, but he couldn't see her face. Could this be the wife of the Lord of Yunzhou? Tisk tisk. Just by looking at her back, you can tell she must be extremely beautiful. Just as Musian was admiring this, the woman in mid-air suddenly looked back inadvertently, with a faint smile that seemed to see through everything in her beautiful green eyes. "Musian, it's you again, it's you again." At this time, Gu Boxing suddenly let out a hysterical roar. He had already realized that the reason why the powerful people he had secretly contacted retreated was probably due to Musian's contribution. The god of space seemed to be asking for help from Musian, but the medicine king from Yuzhou never showed up. There was not even a reply from the demon world. Reminiscent of the past attitude of the queen of the demon realm towards Musian, Gu Boxing has completely woken up. In the past, he deduced the secrets of heaven and calculated everything in the Dakian dynasty, but he never thought that one day he would lose to an ant whose realm was far lower than his. But, no matter what benefits you promise to the god of space and others, you must have this life to fulfill this promise. With a hint of sternness in his eyes, Gu Boxing suddenly let out a low roar. The spiritual energy that had been sealed in his cauldron was actually surging, and along with the national destiny and the will of all living beings, it was injected into the colorful altar. He's casting a soul-calling spell. Such a desperate move. Once the soul-summoning technique fails, no matter whether he survives in the end, he will face the Qing Emperor, and even the entire East Continent's crusade. But he no longer cares about so much, and now he can only find the possibility of a comeback by making a desperate move. Gu Boxing was lying on the ground like a devout believer, chanting obscure incantations. Buzz. The monstrous national destiny is rushing towards the colorful altar. Boom. Almost at that moment, the entire colorful altar exploded, and a dazzling beam of light shot into the sky. The entire East Continent was in turmoil, making a deafening sound. It's true, it's true. My deduction is correct. You really exist and have never fallen. Gu Boxing stumbled towards the dazzling beam of light. He realized that the record in the bamboo slips was correct. The quasi-immortal was really alive, and just as he had deduced, he was sleeping deep in the southern wilderness. Muse Haijing looked quietly in the direction of Nanhuang. He was waiting for the arrival of the woman sealed by heaven in the depths of the southern wilderness. At this moment, the black mist in the entire southern wilderness was trembling violently. Even Yao Meng couldn't break the seal of the arrow of heaven. But the way of heaven originally originated from all living beings, and the fate of the country and the wishes of all living beings are symbols of all living beings. Perhaps, the seal of the arrow of heaven can really be unlocked. Mu Jian held some hope in his heart. In the secret realm where the original witch slept, the arrow of heaven that had been silent all along descended with the overwhelming will of all living beings. For a moment, it emitted a dazzling light, as if it had woken up and was struggling to escape. The body of the original witch. It is really unimaginable that this arrow made from the origin of heaven has experienced the erosion of time, but it still contains incomparable terrifying power. However, at this moment, the original witch, who was in deep sleep, twitched her eyelashes slightly, and she slowly opened her eyes. He lowered his eyes slightly, looked at the arrow with a milky white halo, and said softly, "Be quiet." As soon as he finished speaking, the signs of the heavenly arrow's struggle gradually subsided. Until finally, it completely dimmed. Only a ray of light from heaven floated out from the secret realm. No movement. Musian watched the violent movement gradually subside, and couldn't help but frown slightly. That's it? Gu Qiaoshi is not very good. I thought he could really break the seal of the arrow of heaven, but it seems unrealistic to rely on him like this. Musian raised his head and looked at Gu Boxing, who was ashen-faced, and said, "Master Gu, is there anything else you want to say?" Gu Boxing looked a little dull and murmured to himself, "How is it possible? According to my calculations, she should be able to come. Why?" He seemed a little unbelievable and seemed to have been hit in some way. At this time, two elders from the Yaokai Holy Land quietly descended. At Yao Meng's signal, they activated the spell and brought Gu Boxing out of the mountain top. I thought he could really take this opportunity to release the last original witch's consciousness in the depths of the southern wilderness. Musian sighed with some regret. Yao Meng stared at the direction where Gu Boxing was taken away quietly without saying anything. "What's wrong?" Musian turned around and asked. He saw that Yao Meng seemed to be thinking about something. "I was thinking, Gu Boxing's furnace was sealed by me. Why did he suddenly have the idea of fighting to the death? And why can he deduce where the original witch was sealed?" Yao Meng looked back at Musian. Where did the bamboo slip he was looking at come from? Hearing this, Musian couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Indeed, the things about the original witch recorded in the bamboo slips are true, but where did Gu Boxing find this bamboo slip? Why would he go to the Jixian pavilion to borrow this bamboo slip? Musian's eyes flickered. Maybe, someone secretly told Gu Boxing? Let's go back first, there are too many people here. At this time, Yao Meng's soft and pleasant voice sounded, pulling Musian back to reality from his previous thoughts. Musian suddenly came to his senses, and then he suddenly realized that a lot of cultivators had gathered at the foot of the mountain, and they seemed to be attracted by Gu Boxing's sacrifice today. Musian also saw the eldest daughter of the Dagon dynasty in the crowd. Musian was naturally very good to the princess who provided information this time. He nodded to her calmly, and then left Liangxin Mountain with Yao Meng. Because he had been in Yaokai for some time and had not seen his disciples for a long time, after learning that his disciple Yeqian had just returned to the sect not long ago, Yao Meng took the lead in going to Dexin Garden not far away to see his disciples. After that, you can also bring Qianer to Tianhe Garden to find him together. After watching Yao Meng leave, Musian took out the bamboo slips from his arms and read them carefully, trying to figure out whether there was someone behind Gu Boxing who was using him to drive him to refine the national destiny today. Tick-tock. Tick-tock. The sound of rain sounded silently, and the raindrops hit the green leaves and fell on the floor. The floor outside the courtyard soon became white. Then, I don't know when it started, the splashing water quietly stagnated. Master, why are you here? In Dexin Garden, Yeqian, who had just finished meditating, saw the fairy in the green skirt not far ahead at a glance. Her beautiful eyes immediately lit up and she immediately came to meet her. The little fish in Musian's fish pond have been suppressed by the Green Emperor to a greater or lesser extent, except Yeqian. On the one hand, it was because the other party was a disciple of the Green Emperor, and on the other hand, it was mainly because Yeqian's XP was really a bit strange, and it was impossible to suppress it at all. I haven't come to see you for a long time. I just heard him say you were here today, so I came to see you. Yao Meng smiled charmingly and gently stroked the disciple's soft hair. Where is your sister? The restricted area will soon select the candidate for the restricted area master. My sister has been practicing in seclusion during this period, Yeqian said. Yao Meng said meaningfully, that's great, I'll take you to find your brother Mu. You've been practicing all this time, so you probably haven't seen him much, right? She bent her knees slightly, gently stroked Yeqian's pure and charming face with her slender hands, and smiled, take this opportunity to teach you some interesting things besides practicing. Yeqian nodded blankly at first, then looked at the woman who was holding her hand and about to leave Dexin Yuan, and suddenly said, by the way, master. Yao Meng looked back inadvertently, and seeing the disciple's blank eyes, she couldn't help asking, huh? What's wrong? Yeqian tilted her head slightly, and then, under Yao Meng's slowly solidified gaze, she asked softly, Brother Mu, who is it? Warm Ti. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 497. Half an hour ago. It was raining outside the courtyard, and the ground was splashing with white water. Musian opened the bamboo slips and looked at the various records on the bamboo slips in the sound of rain, with a hint of thoughtfulness in his eyes. There is no doubt that the record in this bamboo slip is indeed describing the original witch. There are currently 2 strands of the original witch's spiritual consciousness in Sister Mengru's body, and the spiritual consciousness deep in the southern wilderness is the last one, and if the description in this record is correct, the original witch's spiritual consciousness, I'm afraid its strength far exceeds the other 2. But the question is, who recorded this thing? How did the other party know where the original witch was sealed? Why did Gu Boxing find this bamboo slip? Maybe I should find time to go to Yaokai and see if I can get some useful information from Gu Boxing. After thinking about this, Musian got up and was about to go to Dexin Garden next door. Yao Meng and Qianer were both there now, and he was a little concerned about what the master and apprentice were talking about. Just as Musian stood up, he suddenly felt a faint white light flashing in front of his eyes. The white light was extremely soft, sacred, and charming, but the first time he saw it, Musian felt a chill. Just this ray of white light seems to be able to annihilate the illusion of stars. Musian narrowed his eyes and stared at the thing in the white light. It was an arrow, very small, even only the size of a fingernail. But when it came, the spiritual energy in the entire space seemed to be deprived of it at that moment, and the space was distorted at that moment, forming a vortex of airflow. Arrow of heaven. Musian's expression changed, and he finally realized the origin of this thing. The arrow of heaven that sealed the last spiritual consciousness of the original witch. However, the aura of this heavenly arrow is far less terrifying than the arrow that sealed the original witch. I'm afraid not even 1% of it. Whoosh. The arrow flew out quickly. It did not penetrate Musian's body, but stopped in front of him. A soft pale white light fell on Musian's head. In the light, it seemed as if a woman personified by thousands of lights descended from the sky and reached out to gently caress his face. Like the mother goddess who created the world, she is all-encompassing. Musian tried to move, but found that it was difficult to move even one finger, not to mention his body. "Who are you?" he asked awkwardly. He or she didn't speak, just stared at Musian tenderly, and then gently held him in his arms. At this moment, the misty rain was stagnant, and the whole world seemed to have frozen. Then, the soft halo gradually enveloped Musian's body completely. Musian felt a strong sense of sleepiness and a sense of security. He knew that this kind of method that seemed to have no killing intention was often the most deadly, but he still let down his vigilance and guard little by little. "I want to sleep in such a warm embrace." Until finally, he slowly closed his eyes. The soft white light dissipated, and there was no one in the courtyard. Only the patter of rain was left. In the intertwining of light and shadow, time passed silently. Why did Master suddenly take me to see that brother Mu? Who is he? In the courtyard of Dexingyuan, Yechian stood still, with a confused look on his face, and looked at his master with puzzled eyes. Yao Meng suddenly heard a shout from behind him, "Where is Senior Kingdi planning to take Qian'er?" Yao Meng looked back and saw Ye Lingxian walking out of the house at some point. "I originally planned to take Qian'er to meet your brother Mu, but she seems..." Before Yao Meng finished speaking, he couldn't help but froze for a moment when he saw Ye Lingxian. Her eyes slowly opened wide, as if she remembered something important. She quickened her pace and rushed out of Dexingyuan. "What's wrong with you?" Yao Meng immediately stopped her. Ye Lingxian stopped at the door of Biwen. She stared blankly at the empty Liulai palace and murmured softly, I want to see someone, but I forgot who that person is. He seems to be I am an important person." As she spoke, she slowly hugged her knees and squatted on the ground, resting her forehead weakly on her knees. It was the first time that Yao Meng saw this arrogant genius girl showing such an expression. She was as confused and helpless as an abandoned girl. She looked at the reincarnated queen who was following Ye Lingxian like a shadow. "Don't you remember either?" The reincarnated queen looked at Ye Lingxian silently and shook her head gently. "I know all her memories, and I naturally don't know the things she doesn't know." Yao Meng was silent. Some monks who practice the method of qi training are indeed able to block the secrets of heaven to a certain extent, and even make people unable to detect the existence of the other party. But I can't even remember the reincarnated queen. There is only one person who can do this. The way of heaven. The Hedeo realm is within the rules of heaven and earth, so it is still restricted by the rules of heaven. After the rules of heaven block Musian, naturally no one will think of him. But the Ascension realm is an exception. It seems like something happened to him. At this moment, Yao Meng suddenly caught a very familiar aura. Her spiritual consciousness locked on the other person almost immediately, and she looked at the woman who spoke. That iconic black and white palace dress, and the bright plum blossoms embroidered on the fabric, there is no doubt that it is Gong Lianyu. "Why are you here?" Yao Meng asked. Gong Lianyu looked at Ye Lingxian, who was held in the arms of the reincarnated queen, with an expression full of struggle, and Yechian, who looked confused and worried about gains and losses, and said expressionlessly, "The memory of Lian Hideo realm has been slightly affected. If Ruoxi hadn't told me about the changes here, I might not have noticed it yet. The feathering realm is not affected by the heavenly rules, so your and my memories have not changed at all, but other people's memories are more or less biased, right?" Yao Meng was calmer than expected. Looking at Ye Lingxian and Ye Qian, he suddenly asked quietly, "Do you really not remember anything about Musian?" I don't know who Musian you are talking about. Is he important to me?" Ye Lingxian shook his head gently, looking struggling. Yao Meng stared at the two of them quietly and suddenly said, "Have you ever thought about it? If Musian really does not exist in this world, then who did you give your first kiss or even your first time to?" The moment this voice fell, it was like a crack in my mind. Ye Lingxian was embarrassed at first, because in her worldview, it was impossible for such a ridiculous thing to serve the same husband with Jian'er. But before she spoke, she suddenly realized that her first essence had been lost long ago. Ye Qian was also stunned for a moment. Then, the girl's originally dazed and painful eyes gradually lit up like never before. Yes. She had felt as if there was an empty space in her heart, and she had an inexplicable sense of loss, because she had forgotten someone very important, and, she was not sure whether that person really existed. But if that person is not a real person, then who was her first kiss and even her body dedicated to? Ye Lingxian seemed to have remembered something important, and took out a snow lotus symbolizing purity from the ring. She never thought that she had forgotten someone or something, but for some reason, when she saw this snow lotus, I feel very nostalgic and have an inexplicable resentment. Why the resentment? Are you resenting someone? But if that's the case, why can't I hate that person? Ye Lingxian slowly hugged the snow lotus into her arms, as if feeling the warmth brought by the snow lotus. Yao Meng's eyes moved slightly, as if he didn't quite understand the meaning of Ye Lingxian's action. In the past, Mu Lang gave us a snow lotus when he was in Tianqian City, and this one was probably given to Sister Lingxian when he first met her by Ruoxi's soft voice said in the garden. Sounded. He really has his style, Yao Meng said softly. Aren't you worried about his safety? Gong Lianyu asked. The Liangyi sex formation is still there, and he has the seat of the Lord of Heaven that he has not used. It's okay. Yao Meng said lightly, besides, he is the man I like. I don't believe he will disappear into this world forever without leaving even a trace. As the two human emperors left, in Dexan Garden, the reincarnated queen gently hugged Ye Qian and Ye Lingxian, as if to comfort them. Do you think I really have someone I like? Ye Lingxian suddenly asked softly in the soft embrace of the woman in white robe. The reincarnated queen silently stared at the girl in her arms and said softly, I don't really believe it. Ye Lingxian seems to be very polite to everyone, and she is a very polite young lady, but in fact, her arrogance may be unparalleled, because from the past to the present, there is no one with higher talent than Ye Lingxian in the same age. But just now Emperor Qing said. Before Ye Lingxian finished speaking, the reincarnated queen suddenly let go of Ye Lingxian and pointed to her chest gently, but your heart will not lie to you. Are you sad now? She asked again. Ye Lingxian was silent for a long time and hummed softly. She couldn't remember the Musian mentioned by King Di, but every time she saw the snow lotus, her heart felt a tingling sensation, as if being pricked by a needle. After a long time, as if she had made up her mind, she raised her head and stared at the reincarnated queen. After returning to the restricted area this time, I want to complete the final resonance with you. After completing the resonance with the reincarnated queen, she is no longer Ye Lingxian, but the queen of the restricted area with the complete memory of 9 generations. According to the reincarnation of the queen, she had never had a Taoist partner in the past 9 lives, but in this life she had confirmed her relationship with someone, even with Jian'er. You used to reject past memories, why are you willing to? Accepting memory also means being able to know the paths I have taken in the past 9 lives, it is not enough for you to tell me these paths. Only by knowing all this can I be qualified to attack the feathering realm. Yalingxian slowly raised his head, his beautiful eyes as magnificent as purple gems filled with unprecedented determination. Tianhe Garden. If my guess is correct, his disappearance may be related to the arrow of heaven that sealed the original witch. The moment Yao Meng walked into the courtyard, the overwhelming spiritual consciousness almost instantly enveloped the entire courtyard, and no trace of Musian was found. Whenever a monk steps into Tianhe Garden, her spiritual sense can catch every trace of it. But now she can't find any trace of Musian's past in the entire Tianhe Garden. Everything related to him in the room where he used to live disappeared, not even a trace of spiritual energy was left. Why is the heavenly Dao so afraid of him? Gong Lianyu whispered. Let's not talk about the other secrets of him, just the fact that he can give others a seat in the heavenly court to ascend to the sky, this power is enough to make the heavenly Dao afraid. Yao Meng silently scanned the empty courtyard. The heavenly Dao is the consciousness of all living things, and all those who may threaten the stability of the situation in Zhuzhu will be swept away by it in the dark. The Hedao realm is still bound by the rules of heaven and earth, but the Yuhua realm has completely escaped the rules of heaven and earth. And if Musian wants, he can even give birth to 9 Yuhua realms. How can the heavenly Dao not be afraid? But his Tianji was clearly blocked by someone. How did the heavenly Dao find him? Gong Lianyu expressed a doubt that troubled her heart. It was precisely because Musian was blocked by Tianji that the heavenly Dao had never realized what Musian's true identity was. But this time, the arrow of heaven accurately locked onto Musian. Why? Yao Meng shook her head gently. She didn't know the reason, and she was not in the mood to think about it now. After all, her little man was gone when she went out. Next, I will go back in time and try to go back to 1 day ago. Yao Meng looked around the courtyard. Although I am not sure, if you are included, I will definitely be able to save him before he is attacked. Gong Lianyu nodded silently. Then, she frowned slightly and stared into Yao Meng's eyes. What if I can't save him after going back in time? She had the answer in her heart, but wanted to hear the answer from the Green Emperor. Yao Meng looked back. Her blue eyes were full of thrilling charm, and a charming smile bloomed on her face. If he is gone, what do I need this world for? Tick. Tick. The rain stagnated in the air, and then, as if it was strangely reversed, the rain returned to the sky from the ground where it fell. Time began to go back. It was raining heavily outside the courtyard. I don't know when it started, but the soft white light vaguely appeared in the field of vision. Gong Lianyu reacted almost immediately and sacrificed the ancient bronze sword. The sword seemed to contain all kinds of sword intent, and it blasted together with the soft white light. The moment Yao Meng raised his hand, a soft aura wrapped Musian up and took him out of the courtyard. Yao Meng? Didn't you go to find Qian? When Musian turned his head and saw Yao Meng in his field of vision, he had just opened his mouth, and the woman suddenly hugged him tightly in her arms, as if she wanted to feel Musian's presence accurately. But this soft touch made Musian a little confused and stunned for a while. What's going on? Buzz. Just when he thought of this, he suddenly heard a violent buzzing sound in his ears. Musian raised his head and saw the ancient bronze sword in the air intercepting the white light in the air. Arrow of heavenly Dao. Musian looked at the white light in his vision, his pupils contracted, and suddenly a scene of himself being enveloped by the brilliance of the arrow of heavenly Dao flashed through his mind. What was the picture just now? Why can I see my future? As soon as this thought flashed through Musian's mind, a green lotus next to him attacked the sky and wrapped the arrow of heavenly Dao that was originally suppressed by the ancient bronze sword. The next moment, the pure world green lotus completely sealed the arrow containing a trace of heavenly Dao's will. Gong Lianyu slowly floated down from the air, and before Musian could speak, she hugged him in her arms. It's not as big as Ruoxi's, but it's really soft, Musian noticed that the two looked a little strange and asked, "What's wrong with you?" Yao Meng rarely separated Gong Lianyu and Musian at the moment, but just looked at him silently and said, "Let's go to Deck Sinyuan first and talk slowly." When Musian heard what happened before, he showed a look of realization on his face. No wonder Yao Meng and Ruoxi were in that state just now. It turned out that he had definitely disappeared once not long ago. Ya Lingxian hugged Musian's arm tightly. The proud girl was always reserved and didn't like to show her dependence in front of her sister. However, since Musian entered Deck Sinyuan, she has always hugged Musian's arm and refused to let go. Yechian also hugged Musian's other arm tightly. Although she only forgot Musian for a moment, she was still afraid. She was afraid that one day in the future, she would forget Musian's existence like today. "Malang, what are you thinking about?" Ruoxi asked softly, looking at the young man sitting in the hall, holding tea, and seemed to be thinking. Musian frowned and thought, "I just suddenly wondered, why after the seal of the arrow of heaven produced a little fluctuation, the overflowing power did not go to seal the original witch at the first time, but came directly to me." Hearing this, several people also had a little more thought in their eyes. Indeed, the strength of the original witch is a mystery, but it is needless to think that it must be an extremely dangerous existence that can make the heavenly Dao seal it at the expense of its origin. Then the question is, why didn't the arrow of heaven choose to seal the original witch with all its strength after the seal loosened, but attacked Musian instead? In this silence, after an unknown amount of time, Musian looked at the rain outside and slightly restrained his thoughts. No matter how he inferred, there would be no conclusion without sufficient information. Instead of thinking about this, it would be better to find a time to interrogate Gu Boxing and investigate whether there was someone behind him. At this time, Musian suddenly realized that Yao Meng was staring at him straight, and the eyes that were always indifferent in the past now had a bit more complexity. "What's wrong? Why are you staring at me?" Musian asked. "When I think about giving my lover to other women to enjoy, this feeling is really subtle," Yao Meng said faintly. Musian was stunned for a moment, and Ya Lingxian, Yechian and even Ruoxi all looked at Yao Meng subconsciously. After a short silence, Musian spoke up to break the strange silence, "What did you mean just now?" "Luo Tan is interested in you and wants to use the spiritual energy of the natural furnace to try to reach the Yuhua realm." Yao Meng put the invitation letter that Luo Tan asked someone to send on the table. "Similarly, you also need her natural furnace to realize the truth. I'm a little stuck, I'll try to get up early tomorrow." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 498. You mean to combine Mulang with her natural furnace? Ruoxi's cold and melodious voice came from the hall. Her beautiful eyes stared at the holy and noble Yaokai fairy and said, "Not to mention whether the Tian furnace and the Tian furnace are capable of dual cultivation, even if it is possible, it may not really have that effect. Musian's natural furnace cauldron is quite special after all. From the past to the present, Musian is the only natural furnace cauldron that can continuously evolve. It is precisely because of this that his dual cultivation with other girls can make their strength continue to soar. But under normal circumstances, although the body of the natural furnace cauldron has an effect with the dual cultivation, it is definitely not as good as Musian." Yao Meng's gauze-like blue dress swayed with the wind, and a little radiance seemed to loom on her skin. She lightly opened her red lips and said faintly, "No matter why the arrow of heaven is pointed at him, it is better to improve his strength as soon as possible than to stay by his side to protect him all the time. Luo Tan's natural furnace body is a secret. Not many people know about it, but everyone who knows the secret wants to get her share of aura." Yao Meng's voice was soft and gentle, and she said again, "In fact, Even if you have the spiritual energy of heaven in your body, she may not agree if you don't fall in love. In the past, Emperor Daepen of Yunzhou pursued her for a long time after knowing the secret. But she still rejected it. In addition, the Lord of the Underworld in the north also secretly pursued her for a period of time and gave her a lot of heavenly materials and earthly treasures, but they were all rejected. I have heard of Emperor Daepen. He is the Lord of Yunzhou. Musian thought of the man he saw before who seemed to be exuding a cold air, and asked, who is this Lord of the Underworld? The land in the far north of the North Continent, close to Yunzhou, is called the North. People there call it the Hades. In the past, there were often rumors among the people that after death, the soul will return to the Hades. In fact, it is true that after the death of many monks, their souls appeared in the underworld. Yao Meng revealed an unknown secret. Does this mean that not all monks' souls will return to the underworld after death? Musian heard the overtone of Yao Meng's words. Bai Ruoxi hummed softly, after all, the Lord of the Underworld is also a human being, but among the people regard him as the Lord of the Underworld who is in charge of life and death. The path of reincarnation he follows is related to this. What about the Princess of Yunzhou? Musian asked again casually. However, before he finished speaking, no one answered this time. Several people in the room stared at him dimly. Ya Lingxian snorted and said coldly, Brother Mu has been laying the groundwork for so long, but what he really wants to know is the princess in Yunzhou, right? Musian looked at the sister who seemed to be even more clingy than before, and couldn't help but shake his head and laugh. I'm just curious about the information about other powerful people in Kyushu. The last time Yao Meng emerged and ascended in his ancestral land, in addition to the western region and the southern wilderness on the surface, wasn't there a powerful person who was hiding in secret and whose identity was not exposed? I just wanted to take this opportunity to learn a little more. The princess you are talking about is the unmarried wife of Emperor Daepen of Yunzhou. In most cases, external matters are handled by the princess, while Emperor Daepen mostly handles internal affairs. Yao Meng opened her lips lightly. The ethereal voice came to Musian's ears. The relationship between Yunzhou and Yuzhou is relatively close, and there is a lot of trade between them. The relationship between the princess and the Emperor of Medicine is particularly close. In addition, Yao Meng paused and continued, most of the monks in Yunzhou believe in the way of heaven, except for the princess. It's just that no one in Yunzhou has any objection to the existence that the princess believes in. Musian asked curiously, what does the princess believe in? The avenue. Yao Meng said calmly, the so-called princess is not actually owned by Yunzhou, but is similar to the spirit dragon. They are all creatures naturally born from the great Dao. She was connected to the origin of the great Dao when she was born, so when she merged with the Dao, she was also linked to the origin of the Dao. The avenue resonates. Musian fell into thinking. For my sake, Luo Tan did not take action to stop Yao Meng from becoming an immortal. Although Yunzhou has a close relationship with Luo Tan, it does not mean that the steps will be the same as Yuzhou. Yunzhou is not without suspicion of taking action secretly. Besides, there is one more thing. Although you may be aware of it, I still have to remind you. Yao Meng stared at Musian and said, what happened between you and Xi and Tiandao cannot be exposed to people you cannot trust for the time being. All living things in Kyushu ultimately belong to the way of heaven. You can try to make insinuations, but you must not directly invite the other party to resonate with the new way of heaven. Musian nodded slightly, he still knew about this. After all, the status of heavenly Dao in Kyushu is too sacred, and most monks would never have the thought of disobeying it. It's good that you understand the meaning of my words. After sorting things out, I will take you to Yuzhou. It just so happens that I still have an elixir that I need to ask the medicine emperor to help refine, Yao Meng said. Ya Lingxian opened her mouth slightly, as if she wanted to say something. But in the end, she swallowed back the words she wanted to say. Although it is a bit unacceptable for Brother Mu to get close to that medicine king, if you think about it differently, for example, the two of them are not getting close for the sake of getting close, but just a transactional relationship. If you think about it this way, it seems to be barely acceptable. I was able to go back in time and save you this time. I think a big part of the reason is because the power of this arrow of heaven is only a ray of it. So next time if you encounter any danger, you must find a way to avoid it. After leaving Dexin Yuan, Yao Meng suddenly reminded. That arrow of heaven is a method that the heaven once used on the original witch. This time, Gu Boxing prepared for a long time and tried to unseal the heaven with the will of all living beings. It only loosened the seal of the heaven a little bit. So you don't have to worry too much about the arrow finding you again. Gong Lianyu narrowed her beautiful eyes and said quietly, no wonder the origin of heaven has problems. It turns out that it wanted to seal the original witch at the cost of its own origin. Musian was silent. It is enough to imagine what kind of existence the original witch was, which can make an existence like the heaven even at the cost of its origin to suppress the original witch. He quickly gathered his thoughts and looked at Gong Lianyu, Palace Master, the Dagan dynasty and Gu Boxing will be handed over to you and Ruoxi. As an emperor of a dynasty, it is impossible for him not to know that Gu Boxing is refining the national destiny, but he did not stop it. It is better to say that the old emperor also supported this matter behind the scenes. He originally planned to go to the Dagan dynasty first, but now think about it, maybe he should go to fulfill his previous agreement with Luo Tan first. With Yao Meng. Gong Lianyu nodded slightly, and then glanced at Yao Meng, protect him well. Yao Meng smiled faintly, don't worry, I will protect him wholeheartedly. Gong Lianyu frowned slightly. She always felt that Yao Meng's wholeheartedly meant something. The next moment, Yao Meng had torn open the space crack with his bare hands. Musian thought about it, first informed Yao Meng, and then went to Huabao Peak and met Wei Mengru who was transforming the spirit of the weapon at Huabao Peak. After patiently waiting for a while, he went forward to say hello after Wei Mengru enlightened the spirit of the weapon, and then he took the maid and went to the immortal dynasty in Yuzhou with Yao Meng. Yuzhou, where all kinds of rare and exotic herbs grow. Located deep in the imperial palace of Yuzhou, in an ancient hall. Luo Tan, wearing a luxurious white dress, was sitting in front of the bedroom. She wore a spiritual ring with several rare and precious spiritual stones the size of small stones on the ring. Her hair was tied up with a jade hairpin, and her makeup looked extremely luxurious. Such luxurious makeup and dress would look too vulgar on any woman, but on the Empress of Yuzhou, there was no sense of vulgarity at all, but it added a bit of elegance and luxury. The Princess of Yunzhou came here, and the servants didn't even notify her. It's really rude. While reviewing the memorials of the ministers of the immortal dynasty in the bedroom late at night, Luo Tan suddenly said something inadvertently. You don't have to blame the servants. I told them to keep quiet to avoid disturbing your business. A pleasant voice came from the hall, and a woman with a slender figure walked into the bedroom with elegant steps. Her loose hair was tied up and gently placed on her shoulders. The princess wore a rather low-key plain dress with plump and beautiful flowers on it, just like her plump and beautiful, outlining her full chest and slender waist, as tempting as a ripe peach. Although her face was covered with a thin veil, it was not difficult to see from the gentle eyes that seemed to embrace everything in the world what kind of peerless face was under the veil. And she wore a light yellow skirt on her lower body, which made the woman's beauty have a bit of intellectuality and elegance. Princess, you rarely left Yunzhou in the past. How come you have time to come to Yuzhou to see me today? Luo Tan raised her beautiful eyes with a hint of smile in her eyes. I haven't seen old friends for a long time. I happened to go to Dongzhou this time, so I came to see old friends. The princess smiled softly, why, are you not welcome? How dare I not welcome you? If you hadn't saved my life, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to merge with the Tao smoothly until now. Luo Tan smiled brightly, but you came to me, I'm afraid it was the idea of the great Peng Emperor. As for the reason, well, let me guess. Luo Tan supported the table and stood up leisurely, walked down the steps step by step, stepped on a pair of knee-high snow-white boots under the layered and complicated white skirt, and had an elegant demeanor. The Green Emperor ascended to heaven, the great powers of Juzhu, and even the forbidden monsters whose lifespans had been exhausted, were not happy. Therefore, when the Green Emperor ascended to heaven, all the powerful and the holy places of the Dao had made some movements, but Yuzhou and the demon world did not make any movement. Is the Emperor Dapen worried that Yuzhou would lean towards the Green Emperor, so he asked you to test my intentions? Seeing that the princess was silent, Luo Tan walked slowly in front of her and said with a smile, I am very curious, what conditions can the Emperor Dapen use to convince you? Although she is the Emperor Dapen's fiancée, the princess was born with the connection to the Dao, and her spiritual energy is inexhaustible. She has never failed since her debut. The marriage between the Emperor Dapen and the princess was also arranged by the princess's adoptive parents when she was young. So many years have passed, and the Emperor Dapen rarely speaks to this princess of the Dao, let alone her hands. Luo Tan was not surprised that the Emperor Dapen would test her. Rather, she had discovered the spy left by Yunzhou in the Immortal Dynasty as early as the Sabbath. What really surprised her was why this princess came here to see her. It's not that Emperor Dapen convinced me, but I came to see you on my own this time. However, the princess' words made Luo Tan stunned for a moment, and then she heard her continue, you have been together for at least 5 lifetimes. The most important reason why Zhu has been able to maintain a peaceful situation is because of the major, the strength of the forces maintains a delicate balance. Once this balance is broken, as long as Qing Emperor has ambitions, Kyushu will be in turmoil. So whether they were the enemies of Qing Emperor or those who had no grievances against Qing Emperor, most of them didn't want her to become immortal and ascend. Luo Tan raised her beautiful eyebrows slightly, motioned to the maid on the side, and asked the princess to take a seat. She nonchalantly held up the enlightenment tea. The aroma of the tea overflowed, and it seemed that there was a rich ray of light permeating the tea, and the aura was extremely rich. So you're curious why I didn't stop the Qing Emperor from emerging, but chose to stand by and watch, Luo Tan asked. The princess nodded slightly, with the first one in the Ascension realm, there will be the second one, Sword Emperor Palace Lian Yu has confirmed this not long ago. After this, the situation that Kyushu has formed so far may be broken. I don't think it's good for you, right? She looked at the Empress of the Immortal Dynasty. Under her veil, a pair of clear and beautiful eyes that were as gentle as water stared quietly at her. Are you worried about me so you came to me? Luo Tan took a sip of tea, moistened her pink lips, and asked with a smile in her eyes. No, I'm afraid it's not just because of worry, but Emperor Dapen has begun to be wary of me, and even the entire Yuzhou, right? The princess was silent. With Luo Tan's keenness, it was not surprising that he could guess this. If Emperor Dapen were here today, I would ask him to leave right now. But since it's you, it doesn't hurt to tell you, Luo Tan said calmly. Have you ever thought about the conflict between the demon realm and Dongzhou, and the Dongzhou monks and demon cultivators are even jealous of each other? Why has the demon realm not participated in such a big event as the Qing Emperor's ascension? The princess was stunned for a moment. Didn't you say that the queen of the demon realm was in retreat at the time, so it was inconvenient to take action? Even if the queen of the demon realm is inconvenient to take action, there is still the ancient Emperor Longxu. If the first seat is willing, he can briefly enter the Hedao realm after burning his blood essence, but from the beginning to the end, there is no movement in the demon realm and Yuzhou. You might as well guess the reason. The princess sat upright, dignified, beautiful but not demonic. She stared into Luo Tan's eyes. Why? Luo Tan's red lips parted slightly and she said softly, have you ever thought about why the Qing Emperor became immortal and ascended for no reason? How did Gong Lianyu become immortal and ascend? Before the princess could speak, Luo Tan said quietly again, I know the secret of ascension. The princess stiffened slightly and stared at her intensely. Her heart trembled violently, and the fair and cold face under the veil seemed to have undergone drastic emotional changes. To become a human and ascend, this is something that countless powerful people dream of. Because after the ascension realm, the rules of heaven and earth are broken, longevity is no longer restricted. Even though she was born with the furnace and was connected to the avenue, she could never find a way to become immortal. In order to become a human and ascend, Emperor Dapen was like a man possessed. He pursued Luo Tan more than once, firstly because of her identity, appearance, and background, and secondly, because he knew about Luotan's other physique, which was the natural furnace. Tripod. You didn't stop the Qing Emperor from ascending to heaven because you also knew how to ascend. The princess lowered her voice subconsciously. Although all the servants here had been sent out, she was still unconsciously worried that the secret would be exposed. This is a secret that is enough to cause the entire Kyushu and even the entire foreign starry sky to go crazy. If the princess hadn't saved Luo Tan's life, and the relationship between the two was like sisters, Luo Tan probably wouldn't have said such a shocking thing today. The princess quickly reacted and murmured again, no. Someone used the secret of emergence to exchange it with you, letting you wait and see what happens, and even help the Qing Emperor become immortal when necessary. It should be said that she is truly the core brain of Yunzhou, and she can even draw inferences from one instance to another. Luo Tan's red lips parted slightly, about to speak. However, at this moment, an attendant from outside the hall suddenly came in a hurry. Luo Tan frowned slightly and said, didn't I say today that there are distinguished guests coming, and anyone who comes to see me will be temporarily declined? The attendant raised his hand and bowed, saying respectfully, Your Majesty, Qing Emperor and Musian are waiting outside the palace. If you say you'll update it early, you'll update it early, and you'll never break your promise. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 499. Musian. When she heard this name, the princess' eyes flickered slightly. She had heard of this person. In the past, the Qing Emperor's wedding partner was this young cultivator named Musian. He appeared here at this moment. I think he needs some elixir, so he asked the Qing Emperor to ask Luo Tan to make the elixir. As for these pretty boys, the princess had seen many of them in Yunzhou in the past. In some holy places in Yunzhou, some female elders liked to bring a young cultivator to have fun every now and then. But she didn't expect that even the Qing Emperor had such an interest. No, it's not an interest, but he really fell in love with that young cultivator. This is a very outrageous thing. You know, in the past, there were many cultivators in Zhuzhou who openly and secretly pursued the first-generation saint of Yaoqi, but no one succeeded until she merged with the Tao. The princess was not surprised. After all, the fairies in the Yaoqi Holy Land were born with Tao fetuses, and those who practiced with them would benefit from it. In addition, every Yaoqi saint had a fairy body, so many people had a purpose. However, their talents are so high that it is almost impossible to pursue them. Even the princess did not expect that such a person would get married a few days ago. Such an absurd thing, even thinking of it now, the princess could not help but secretly shake her head. Since you have something to do later, I will leave for now. After the princess said this, she was about to leave the hall. At this time, Luo Tan called him from behind, since it is a rare trip, why not return to Yunzhou in a few days, so that I can treat you tomorrow? Why should we be so polite? But it doesn't matter, as you said, since you are here, it won't be too late to stay for 2 more days. The princess smiled and finally accepted Luo Tan's kindness. She turned and left the hall, and happened to see the two Qingdi who had just walked in under the guidance of the maid, and Wei Mengru who was waiting in front of the hall. The princess blinked her gentle peach blossom eyes, opened her red lips under the veil, and said in a tender voice, "Qingdi, what a coincidence, I didn't expect to see you here." The mature, cold, and gentle fairy stopped in front of the palace gate, with soft eyebrows and eyes, as if she pitied the world, and a little cinnabar between her eyebrows, making her already beautiful face more cold and fairy-like. She turned her head to look at the princess of Yunzhou beside her, and her voice was as soft as the sound of nature. "It is indeed a coincidence. The last time the princess wanted to seize the national destiny of Dagon, she failed. I didn't expect to see you here again at Yehuang after a few days of separation." Musian smelled a strong smell of gunpowder and wanted to speak out to stop her, but at this time, the princess's eyes had already fallen on Musian first. Her demeanor was always dignified and elegant. Although her veil concealed her peerless beauty, Musian, with his years of experience, could tell what kind of stunning beauty the Emperor Daipen's fiancée had just by looking at her gentle eyes that seemed to melt a man's heart. This must be the Taoist partner of the Green Emperor, Musian, right? The princess' voice was gentle and pleasant, and her beautiful eyes were gentle. Musian smiled and nodded. He wanted to say something, but he gave up after thinking about it. After all, Yao Meng and Meng Ro were staring at him at the moment. As a qualified fish pond owner, he could not care too much about other women outside, as this would cause the fish to be jealous. Once the jealousy value is full, even the frivolous fairy will probably turn evil. The princess smiled slightly, retracted her gaze lightly, looked at the Green Emperor and said, "The Green Emperor's Taoist companion is quite polite. She is the princess of Yunzhou, born with a connection to the great Dao, a cultivator who can use the spiritual energy of the great Dao, and the most beautiful woman in Yunzhou, the fiancée of the great Peng Emperor." There are many cultivators who are curious about what kind of face the princess has under the veil. In the past, the cultivators of Yunzhou even rumored that the appearance of this princess is no less than that of the Green Emperor of the Yaokai Holy Land. This is enough to imagine what kind of amazing face the princess has under the veil. However, when facing her, Musian was always calm and did not humbly say anything, which is enough to show that the Taoist companion of the Green Emperor still has some ability, at least in terms of character. She is much stronger than her peers. Yao Meng smiled lightly and said softly, "After all, the princess is the fiancée of the great Peng Emperor. My husband naturally has the most basic courtesy of not looking at inappropriate things." She paused, "But if there is a vixen who deliberately wants to seduce, I'm afraid no man can resist it." It is obvious that the princess just wanted to embarrass Musian by deliberately flirting. This can be understood by any bystander, let alone Yao Meng. A hint of coldness flashed in the princess' eyes, but her face was still gentle and smiling. The Qing Emperor said that, "But I think that the kind of woman who looks like a cold fairy on the surface, but actually seduces men, such a woman is actually no different from a vixen. This woman looks gentle as water, but she is very strong." Musian was a little surprised to secretly look at this sexy woman who is as ripe as a ripe peach, and couldn't help but think in his heart. Of course, he thought about it, but Musian didn't say anything. After all, the princess has nothing to do with him now, and he is not worried that Yao Meng will fall into a disadvantage, so it is better to let them fight on their own. Lord Qingdi, His Majesty is already waiting in the Yuxin Palace. At this time, the little maid who was shivering in the corner suddenly reminded softly, "Let's go in first." Musian did not want to delay here and spoke at the right time to interrupt the dangerous atmosphere. The flames of the war that might have escalated were finally extinguished temporarily. Under the leadership of the maid, Musian walked towards the Yuxin Palace. He glanced at the graceful fairy beside him and suddenly said through a message, "Did you and that princess have any disputes in the past?" Yao Meng said calmly, "There are no festivals." It's just that Emperor Dapen secretly pursued me without telling the princess. Later, I sent a paper crane message to the princess about it, so the matter was settled. If there are other festivals, probably when Yunzhou and Dongzhou had conflicts in the past, I fought against her several times. It turned out that Yao Meng's evil nature was born, Musian asked, so, maybe the princess is jealous. Yao Meng raised her eyebrows slightly and said calmly, the princess doesn't care who Emperor Dapen pursues. She and Emperor Dapen are not actually married. It is said that her adoptive father had already arranged a baby marriage with Emperor Dapen when she was young. Although the princess did not really like this engagement, but the monks in Yunzhou have already recognized her as the princess, so they can only make mistakes. But looking at her like this, I'm afraid that after thousands of years, Emperor Dapen still hasn't been able to touch her hand. Musian's expression was a little subtle, can't Emperor Dapen find another princess? The princess was born with a connection to the Great Road. Her talent, luck, and strength are all top-notch. Her appearance is also one of the best in Kyushu. Do you think Emperor Dapen can give it up? Yao Meng looked at Musian with a half-smile but a hint of playfulness in his voice. Why are you suddenly asking me so many things about her? Yao Meng is good at everything, but he is too sensitive, Musian complained in his heart and explained, the last time you ascended, in addition to the southern wilderness and the western region, there was also a mysterious black-robed power, and there were other powerful people watching secretly at that time, so I naturally wanted to take this opportunity to investigate. Are you saying that there might be someone powerful in Yunzhou who took action against me? Yao Meng's eyes flickered as he thought about Musian's words. Musian nodded. After the Ascension realm, it is equivalent to breaking the situation that Kyushu has formed so far. Even if you have no ambitions, you will still be feared. There are probably many people who want to stop you from becoming Ascension. Therefore, Yunzhou, the possibility of taking action, is not impossible. Yao Meng nodded silently. If I remember correctly, the black-robed master who appeared in front of Yaokai's ancestral land seemed to be a clone, and the opponent's attack method contained the charm of heaven. I originally wanted to use Gu Boxing's incident to force the opponent to take action, so you can identify who it is. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. It's just a pity that the other party was very careful and directly chose to give up Dakian's national destiny and abandon Gu Boxing. This matter cannot be rushed. There will always be opportunities to investigate clearly in the future, Musian said. You're right. Yao Meng suddenly looked at Musian with a smile, but I still think you care about the princess. Just now, you were changing the subject to attract my attention, right? Musian shrugged and sighed, okay, I want to practice dual cultivation with the princess. I just sent a message to her to invite her, but she rejected it. Yao Meng covered her mouth and chuckled, are you practicing dual cultivation with her? Not to mention that your natural furnace is useless to her. Even if it is useful, someone as arrogant as the princess will not be able to lose face. Emperor Dapen has been doing this for thousands of years. It didn't melt her heart, but as for you. She glanced at Musian with a smile, as if everything was silent. Musian glanced back at Yao Meng and did not explain. 30 years to Hedong and 30 years to Hexi, you will definitely regret it in the future. Royal Heart Palace. Luo Tan sat in front of the desk and immediately saw Musian coming into view and Kingdi beside him. I thought you had a conflict with the princess, and I was thinking about going out to have a look. The Empress of the Immortal Dynasty smiled slightly, and with the help of her maid, she held up the hem of her white skirt and walked towards the two of them. This is Yuzhou after all, not Yunzhou. No matter what happens, she will never offend me here. I just had a casual chat with her in front of the palace. Yao Meng glanced at the dense memorials in front of the desk not far away, and couldn't help but smile. Although your body will not be tired when you reach the realm of Medicine King, you should still take a proper rest occasionally. Luo Ten walked to the chair aside and sat down gracefully. He raised his chin slightly and said in a pleasant voice, "It seems like there are a lot of memorials, but in fact it doesn't take much time every day. But sometimes I still really envy Emperor Cheng. With Queen Mother of Yaokai and others here, you don't have to deal with these things." Under the guidance of the maid, Yao Meng and Musian sat down not far from Luo Ten. The fairy showed a bright smile. "I have not interfered with Yaokai's internal affairs for a long time, but sometimes they still like to. If you have to ask me about important matters, it's much easier than Yao Huang." Luo Ten nodded slightly, then looked at Musian with a smile, pausing for a moment on the young man's handsome features, and then said, "Little friend, Mu's cultivation speed is probably beyond the reach of even the geniuses in Yuzhou. Last time we said goodbye, at that time, Xiao was still a god, but now his body has changed, but he is already in the realm of returning to the virtual world." Musian said reservedly, "This is also thanks to the elixir that Her Majesty the Queen previously refined for Mu. If it weren't for the blessing of the demon body, I might not be able to refine the spirit and return to the void so quickly." Luo Ten showed an elegant smile. "Qing Emperor came forward to ask me to refine it. Naturally, I have to sell this favor. If you must thank her, you might as well thank her." When she said this, she couldn't help but look at Musian a few more times, and resisted the urge to use her spiritual sense to scan his body. After all, Qing Emperor was at her side, scanning her husband's body, which was a bit impolite. However, she is still a little concerned about how far the natural furnace has evolved after Musian returned to the virtual realm. At this time, she suddenly noticed that the fairy next to her was looking at him with a bit of amusement. Luo Ten withdrew his gaze without any trace and signaled the maid to serve tea. "Qing Emperor came to Yuzhou today. He must have something important to do business." Yao Mengming smiled brightly. "Actually, it's not that important. It's just that I have been preparing a prescription recently. I think that after collecting the medicinal materials in the future, I hope to ask the Medicine Emperor to help refine it." Luo Ten raised her eyebrows slightly, but did not accept it immediately. She calmly held up the tea. "Qing Emperor might as well say it first, but you should know that I rarely refine elixirs for others. This is my bottom line. As the only alchemist with a quasi-immortal grade, the great powers of various forces in Kyushu naturally want to make friends with him so that the Medicine King can help refine elixirs in the future. However, it's okay once or twice, but if it happens again and again, and every powerful person comes to ask her to refine the elixir in the future, then should she practice it or not? First of all, she didn't have so much time to waste on these things. Secondly, once you accept one of the powerful alchemy requests but reject another, you will inevitably be resented by others over time. The last time the Qing Emperor became immortal and ascended, he asked for a Tegzu pill. Seeing that the person who needed this elixir was Mu Xiao, I gave it to the Qing Emperor as a way to celebrate your emergence and ascension. But this time, I wonder what kind of elixir King Di wants?" Luo Ten asked. 7 grade elixirs, 9 cauldrons to refine Sudan, Yao Meng said. Luo Ten was startled, and then his tone softened a bit. "Juding refining the void pill? So this time is also to prepare for Mu Xiao's future enlightenment." Although the Juding refining void pill is a 7th grade pill, the refining method of this pill is extremely complicated. Among pills of the same grade, it is not an exaggeration to say that it is the most difficult to refine. Moreover, the medicinal materials required for this elixir can be found almost everywhere in Kyushu, including the black flame true leaf in the southern wilderness, the cloudy smoke willow in Yunzhou, the reincarnation water in the Dongzhou restricted area, and even the underworld demon lotus in the north. In addition to the above-mentioned treasures of heaven and earth that are relatively difficult to find, other rare medicinal materials are okay. Although they are difficult to find, they can still be obtained with King Di's background. And this elixir has only one effect, to refine and enlighten the Tao. Musian still has a long way to go before reaching the realm of enlightenment, but King Di is already preparing this elixir, which is enough to imagine how much she trusts her talent as a Taoist companion. If Medicine Emperor is in trouble, just pretend I didn't mention it, Yao Meng said. Luo Tan's eyes flickered and he chuckled, I have always appreciated Mu Xiao's talent. If he were not Qing Emperor's husband, I would have thought of accepting him as a disciple. Besides, the relationship between Qing Emperor and Mu Xiao is also touching, therefore, I can refine the 9 cauldron void pills on your behalf. Yao Meng glanced at Luo Tan meaningfully, with a hint of charm in his blue eyes, and said with a smile, that's good. At first, I thought that if the Medicine Emperor refused, he could ask other alchemists to help with this. Busy, but in terms of completion, I'm afraid it's far behind Yao Huang. She paused for a moment and continued, but apart from refining the alchemy, I also have a gracious request. As soon as these words came out, the elegant smile on Luo Tan's face faded a little. She picked up the teacup, brewed the tea in a leisurely manner, and said calmly, if Qing Emperor has something to say, you might as well say it directly. Ask her to help refine the elixir, and she can sell it to King Di because the person who needs the elixir is Musian. But Qing Emperor kept making requests again and again. Did he regard this place as his own back garden? Yao Meng played with a strand of thin hair in a leisurely manner, and said quietly, next for that elixir, I need to go to the southern wilderness to find the god of space to fulfill her promise. She previously promised to hand over the black flame true leaf. Give it to me. She paused deliberately and said in a cold, crisp voice, this trip can be as short as 3 days or as long as 10 days. During this period, it will be difficult for my husband to stay alone in Lianji sect, so. Luo Tan's fingertips holding the teacup trembled slightly, and her eyes suddenly opened wide, as if she realized something. Yao Meng turned his head and looked up, his voice was calm, but in Luo Tan's heart it was like a huge stone thrown into the lake, causing countless ripples. So, I would like to ask Yao Huang to help take care of my husband for a few days. What do you think? So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 500. For Luo Tan, helping to take care of others is not something she is good at. She is the Empress of Yuzhou. In the past, in addition to dealing with the affairs of the immortal dynasty, she spent more time practicing and studying the method of alchemy. Asking her to take care of someone herself, especially a boy, at least to her, Musian was indeed a boy in terms of longevity. All in all, taking care of others was not something she was good at. Only this time, Luo Tan did not refuse directly. Because she suddenly realized that she couldn't figure out King Di's thoughts. I know that this may be a bit difficult for Yao Huang, but I have no one I can trust in Dongzhou, so I thought about it carefully. It seems that only Yuzhou can allow my husband to practice with peace of mind for some time. Yao Meng was holding tea and staring at the calm pool in the distance. There was a cold texture in his voice and the gentle voice unique to the fairy. Certainly. Yao Meng paused for a moment, with a faint smile on his pretty face, admiring the layout of the hall, and continued, if it's not convenient for the Medicine Emperor, I can't force it. When the time comes, I'll ask others to help me dash. Before he finished speaking, Luo Tan suddenly said casually, Qing Emperor and I hit it off immediately. Since we are your husband, it is appropriate for me to help take care of you for a few days. Qing Emperor does not need to be so indifferent. Yao Meng smiled, this is really great. She withdrew her gaze, looked at Musian with her beautiful eyes, and said in a soft voice, with the Medicine King taking care of me, my husband should be able to feel at ease when I am not here for a few days, right? I always feel like Yao Meng is acting strangely. Musian realized another meaning in Yao Meng's words, and even when he stared into those green eyes, he could see a trace of resentment in the eyes of the Qing Emperor's sister. Obviously, Yao Meng's so-called requesting the medicine emperor to take care of him for a few days was a lie, and it was true that he temporarily entrusted his husband to the medicine emperor. As for what will happen during this period, it depends on what Yao Huang thinks about Musian. Although Yao Meng has always held the idea that as long as I don't feel that I am being cheated, then I am cheating on others, but the practice of giving his lover to other women for a few days, ultimately makes Yao Meng felt a little jealous. That kind of resentful look that seemed like anger and jealousy appeared on such a fairy's charming face. It would be a lie to say that Musian was not moved. But now that there were others watching, Musian had to force himself to look away, and immediately said, "Sister Kingdi can make the decision. In fact, I am also quite interested in alchemy. If I can take this opportunity to learn a little bit, that's fine." Good. This is actually not a lie. Musian is indeed interested in alchemy. In the past, when he refined the second-grade Xiaohuan Dan, he injected heavenly aura into the elixir so that the female cultivator who took the elixir could refine it. Heavenly spiritual energy, but the effect of the elixir on the return to void realm is not that good. If more heavenly spiritual energy can be injected into the elixir, if this elixir spreads to the outside world, the female cultivators in the void return realm may be able to snatch it up like crazy. Musian was still very interested in this alchemy technique, and wanted to learn something from Luo Tan. Yao Meng smiled brightly, seeming to eclipse the bright scenery around him. "Then you should practice well here first. I will come here to find you after returning from the southern wilderness in a few days." At the end of the sentence, she turned her gaze to Luo Tan and said with a smile, "My husband will have to trouble the medicine emperor in the past few days." Luo Tan's delicate hands on her knees subconsciously grasped the gorgeous white skirt. For this medicine emperor, even when she first joined the Tao, her Tao heart had never had such ripples as it does today. When she originally wrote to Musian, she had thought about what she would do if Emperor Qing and Musian came to Yuzhou together. However, he did not expect that Emperor Qing would plan to go to the southern wilderness first in order to refine the void pill for Juding. Moreover, he also sent his husband to her in person. Sensing Yao Meng's gentle gaze, Luo Tan also had a faint smile on his face. "It's okay." Yao Meng put down the teacup, stood up and walked to Musian, gently caressed the green lotus ring on his finger with her delicate hand, then raised her beautiful eyes and said with a smile, "I've been away for a few days. You have to practice hard and don't let me down." As soon as her voice fell, she turned into a wisp of green figure, and the next moment, it seemed to be blown away by the wind. He actually left. Until the woman left, Luo Tan still seemed a little unbelievable and couldn't help but whisper softly. It was clear that she and Qing Di just met by chance. Could the other party trust her so much? But that's true, she is a powerful person in the Hedao realm, and she has a noble status in Kyushu. No matter who is trying to figure it out, they probably won't think that she will be involved with this big boy. What's more, he already has a Taoist companion, one of whom is even the Qing Emperor of the Yaokai Holy Land. If anyone knew about her relationship with Musian, once this matter spread, even the reputation of the Medicine King would be damaged. Luo Tan quickly calmed down his thoughts and turned around with a smile, "Come out with me to relax." "Did it start just after Yao Meng left?" Musian nodded slightly, "Okay." Luo Tanping dismissed the guards and maids, and walked side by side with Musian from the back door of the hall to the lakeside. "I thought you would go to Yuzhou alone, but I didn't expect that it was Emperor Qing who sent you here. She really values you very much." Luo Tan stepped on snow-white jade boots, and the gorgeous white dress inlaid with gold and silver threads made her temperament more elegant and noble. Many women look cliched after wearing gold and silver, but from this quasi-immortal alchemy empress, it does not feel vulgar at all, but adds a bit of nobility. On her fair jade neck, she wore a necklace carved with rubies, which was completely hidden in her full and upright chest, unfathomable. "Sister Kingdi really treats me very well." In fact, she planned to go to the South Wilderness this time, but she was worried about leaving me alone in Dongzhou. Later, she learned that His Majesty cherished talents, so she thought of you here. Musian glanced at Luo Tan and saw that she seemed to have some doubts, so he explained the whole story in detail. With Kingdi's connections in Dongzhou, it stands to reason that he should not ask me for such a troublesome thing. Luo Tan's tone was always elegant, and he admired the scenery by the lake along the way, but he was still a little confused about this matter. Musian sighed softly, Your Majesty, you don't know that although Sister Kingdi has a wide network of contacts in Dongzhou, I didn't have a Taoist partner with her at the beginning. I think you should have heard about it. Luo Tan nodded slightly, I heard a little bit about it. She did something wrong in this matter. Kingdi was not Musian's first Taoist partner, but she inserted herself in the middle. Luo Tan naturally investigated this matter clearly. But there is no so-called fairness in love. Although it is inappropriate, it is also human nature and understandable. Thinking of what he would do to the child next to him, Luo Tan quickly added another sentence. She slowed down her pace a little, looked at him with a slight smile, moved her rosy little mouth, and said, Since you are interested in alchemy, then you should get ready today. After the morning court tomorrow, you will wait for me in the bedroom. I will teach you the method of alchemy in person. Why do you have to go to the bedroom to make alchemy? Musian nodded slightly, and glanced at the tall empress without leaving a trace. Different from the women Musian had known before, this empress seemed to be the epitome of nobility and elegance. Although you knew her status in Yuzhou, you couldn't help but want to tease her and suppress her, and then watch her fall from her high and mighty posture to the mortal world, revealing an embarrassed and shy look. What's wrong? Is there something on my face? Luo Tan knew what Musian was thinking, but he didn't reveal it, but asked deliberately. Musian calmly withdrew his gaze and said, Speaking of which, the Lianji sect held an alchemy competition a few days ago. Does your Majesty remember it? Luo Tan nodded slightly, I invited you after that time, so I naturally remember this matter. I've been thinking recently that although the pills I made contain the spiritual energy of the heavenly court, the spiritual energy of the heavenly court injected into the pills is limited, and the help for the return to Void Realm is not as great as imagined, but if more spiritual energy of the heavenly court is injected into the pills will explode. Musian paused, Does your Majesty have any way to combine the two? Perfectly integrate the spiritual energy of the heavenly court with the pills, and even let the cultivators in the return to Void Realm refine the spiritual energy of the heavenly court with this pill and benefit from it. Hearing this, Luo Tan's beautiful eyes flickered, and she couldn't help but fall into thought. This is a field she has never touched before. After all, even if it is the combination of the Tao, it is impossible to touch the heavenly court, let alone the spiritual energy of the heavenly court. Then, she chuckled, This is a very interesting question. I will think about it after I go back today and give you an answer in 2 days. Do you still have the second-grade Xiao Huan Dan infused with the spiritual energy of the heavenly court? Luo Tan asked. Musian took out a jade bottle from the ring and handed it to Luo Tan. Just by sniffing the fragrance from the jade bottle, Luo Tan's expression became a little more intoxicated. After a while, she slowly opened her beautiful eyes and whispered, In fact, even if you don't have a natural furnace, I will invite you to Yuzhou for a while. Alchemy is different from cultivation. Basic skills are important, but flexible application of alchemy is equally important. It is not necessary to add medicinal materials according to the recipe to make the elixir. And your innovation in alchemy in the past is also the reason why I invite you. Musian smiled, It's a pity that I grew up in Dongzhou. If I was born in Yuzhou, I would definitely find ways to serve your Majesty and work like a cow or a horse. Luo Tan glanced at him with a smile, If you are willing, it's not too late now. The words were sincere, and it was obvious that the Empress really threw out an olive branch. I just don't know whether she wants to use the public car for private purposes more or she really loves talents. Of course, Although she invited him, she didn't think Musian would agree at the beginning, and it was impossible for the Qing emperor to agree to let Musian stay for a long time. By the way, when I was in Tianqian City, I was often taken care of by a guest official in the clan. If it weren't for him, I probably wouldn't be here now. He has only been interested in alchemy in his life. I wonder if your majesty would. Musian suddenly remembered this. Luo Tan accepted it casually. That's fine. I'll write a letter of recommendation and let him go to Zunyun Academy. There are many elders there who are devoted to studying alchemy. I think his alchemy skills will be greatly improved in the future. Musian raised his hand and bowed. Then Mu, on behalf of the elders of the clan, would like to thank your majesty first. Luo Tan looked back casually, looking at the boy with an extremely sincere attitude. She took a half step forward, and said with a smile, in fact, you are so polite that it makes people feel alienated. In the past, you kept staring at my legs in my bedroom, and you were never so restrained as today. Musian said reservedly, in fact, I have always respected your majesty in my heart. I couldn't help looking at you in the bedroom at that time. Isn't it just proved that your charm is too great? Flattery. Luo Tan raised her eyebrows and said lightly. But the corners of her mouth raised a beautiful arc. It seems that because of the busy Sabbath during this period, Luo Tan felt tired after walking for a while. She stopped at the lakeside, and her beautiful figure was close to the fence that exuded a faint sandalwood scent by the lake. This action also made her heavy chest press on the fence. Very big, although not as big as Ni 11, it may be difficult to grasp with one hand. Musian glanced at it with his peripheral vision and quickly moved his eyes away. Sometimes I also hope to be as free as the Green Emperor, but I can't give up this immortal dynasty. The Alchemy Empress lay on the fence, her long and curvy hair trembled slightly, her eyes seemed to be tired, and it seemed that the noble and elegant eyes of the past had melted. After the Hedeo realm, although the body will not be tired and the spirit is almost impossible to collapse, the mind will be numb over time, because day after day, it is doing the same thing. Luo Tan sighed lightly. Although he was a great Hedeo and the emperor of alchemy, he could refine pills to prolong his life, but repeating the same thing every day was too boring. Musian stared at her profile silently. Until then, he felt that the Empress seemed to be a little closer to him, with a little more fireworks, as if the jade beauty had come alive. For me, the purpose of ascending to the sky is not to be invincible in the world, but to have a goal. Luo Tan slightly turned his eyes to look at Musian, and his rosy lips opened slightly. In fact, I am very relaxed when I am with you. It's just a pity that I met you too late. Musian reached out and held her soft little hand at the right time, staring at the beautiful eyes that seemed to be mixed with a little fatigue. It seemed that she had just taken off the disguise of the Empress and showed the posture that a woman should have. When the two of them looked at each other, Luo Tan's beautiful eyes reflected the boy's face gradually approaching her, until finally, they seemed to be able to feel each other's breath. For the first time in history, she felt a little shy and subconsciously turned away. Why wasn't she so shy when she teased me before? Is she as high attack and low defense as Sister Kingdi? Musian looked at the Empress's seemingly shy appearance and seductive red lips. While staring into her eyes, Musian's lips slowly approached. But just when he was about to occupy her red lips, he stopped, and when she opened her eyes in confusion, he said hesitantly, if your servants see us here, it seems not good. The noble and elegant Empress couldn't help but give Musian a contemptuous look. Getting the advantage and still acting cute. She took the initiative to step forward and hooked Musian's neck, and her red lips were about to occupy the boy's lips. At this time, a faint sound of footsteps came from the distance, accompanied by an anxious voice, which instantly broke the warm atmosphere here. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. The maid came trotting with her skirt lifted, and when she saw the scene in front of her, her eyes widened slightly, her mouth opened slightly, and she was a little surprised. Luo Tan frowned slightly, pushed Musian away calmly, glanced at the maid, and said calmly, "What's the matter?" The maid reacted, looked at Musian curiously, and then said, "The great Peng Emperor of Yunzhou has just arrived in Yuzhou, and now he is outside the palace to see your majesty." "The great Peng Emperor? Is he the princess's fiancé, the lord of Yunzhou?" Musian's eyes moved slightly, and he glanced at Luo Tan, saying, "Since your majesty is still busy, I will not disturb you for now." Luo Tan raised her eyebrows slightly, and seemed to be a little surprised. She nodded gently, "You can go back to Daoka Palace first. I have already arranged an empty room for you and your maid. Your maid should be in Daoka Palace now. Do you need a servant to take you there?" Musian shook her head and smiled, "No, I still remember that road. Just take it as a way to relax." Luo Tan nodded slightly. She seemed to know what the maid beside her was thinking, and said lightly, "You didn't see anything today, understand?" "I understand," the little maid knelt on the ground and answered hurriedly. It was not until then that she realized what kind of scene she had just encountered. This noble majesty was actually being intimate with the husband of the Green Emperor just now. If this matter were to spread, it would probably cause a huge uproar. "Let's go," Luo Tan said lightly. Musian looked at the backs of the two people until they were completely far away, and then he leisurely withdrew his gaze. He did not go to Daoka Palace, but walked leisurely along the garden, and admired the nearby medicinal herbs that were like blooming flowers. After all, he was the Dan Emperor. Most of the medicinal herbs planted in Luo Tan's garden were rare, and some of them even had a glow on them, which was particularly sacred. "Tisk tisk, what a rich sister, I haven't seen so many medicinal herbs in Lianji section. I wonder if I will have the opportunity to collect some and take them back this time, and make medicinal food for Ling-er." Musian walked along the garden all the way, with a few sighs in his heart. If Linglong knew that Musian had not forgotten him at this moment, he would be moved by Musian's tenderness. "This is the first time in so many years that I have seen her care so much about a man, especially a man who is already a Taoist monk." While relaxing in the garden, Musian suddenly heard a soft voice that was as gentle as water. Musian paused slightly and looked in the direction of the voice. "I saw a slim woman wearing a thin veil sitting under the pavilion in the distance, staring here." "Princess?" Musian was thinking about this, but he saw that the princess had raised her hand to gesture to the stone chair opposite him. Under the veil, her plump and attractive red lips were slightly opened, and she said with a smile, "Little friend Mew, can you chat with me?" Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 501. Luo Tan returned to the Yuxin Palace, followed by the maid. There were not many decorations on both sides of the hall, but the fragrance of medicinal herbs could be vaguely smelled. The soft lichen stretches from the main hall to the throne at the end, looking solemn and solemn. "Go and invite Emperor Daipen to come to the hall," Luo Tan ordered softly. Her bun was combed in a complicated and luxurious way, with a valuable gold tassel inserted into it. The end of the gold thread tassel was inlaid with a priceless gold-scaled pearl. As the lotus step moved lightly, the tassel then it swayed gently, beautiful and noble. The maid secretly glanced at Her Majesty the Queen. There was still a faint blush on Her Majesty's beautiful face just now, but at this moment, she has restored her former noble and inviolable majesty. She has obviously recovered from her previous emotional state. If she hadn't seen His Majesty being held in the arms of a man with her own eyes before, she wouldn't have believed it even if she was beaten to death. Soon, The maid bowed her head quickly, and then immediately left the hall to ask for Emperor Dapen to come. After a while, Luo Tan was in the hall and heard a hearty laughter coming from the distance. "Yao Huang, it's really difficult to see you, but I really have something important to discuss this time, so I had no choice but to come here rashly. Don't be surprised." Outside the hall, a man with a rather good appearance walked over. He was wearing a dark armor and had his hair tied up with a gold crown. He was extremely handsome. But in fact, appearance is not important at all, at least for the powerful ones in the Hedeo realm. They have seen so many so-called good-looking monks, not to mention that no matter how handsome they are not as handsome as Musian. Yuzhou has been in close contact with Yunzhou since the founding of the dynasty to consolidate the national destiny. The two are allies. Emperor Dapen does not need to be so polite. Luo Tan smiled and glanced calmly at the envoys following Emperor Dapen, then withdrew his gaze and said, "But in the past, the exchanges between Yunzhou and Yuzhou were mostly through envoys. Today Emperor Peng personally, what's the important thing about coming to Yuzhou?" Emperor Dapen gave the envoy beside him a wink, and the envoy immediately understood and quietly retreated. There was a hint of playfulness in Luo Tan's eyes. It seemed that Emperor Dapen had something very important to do when he came to Yuzhou this time. "You should step aside first," she said to the maid beside her. "Yes." After preparing tea for the two of them, the maid bowed slightly and exited the hall. Emperor Dapen took a sip of tea and immediately smiled and said, "It is also enlightenment tea, but the aroma of enlightenment tea from Yuzhou is much more fragrant than that of Yunzhou. Sure enough, in terms of refining medicinal materials, Yuzhou is far better than Yuzhou. Somewhere else." Luo Tan's expression remained unchanged. He lowered his eyes slightly and said, "If Emperor Peng has something to say, you might as well say it directly. Anyone with a discerning eye can see that Emperor Dapen must have something important to come here today, let alone Luo Tan. Furthermore, she has no intention of chatting with Emperor Dapen here about such insignificant polite words." Hearing this, Emperor Dapen couldn't help but smile and said, "Emperor Yao is really smart. In fact, this is why I came here today." He took out a beautiful jade box from the ring. And when the jade box was opened, an astonishingly rich aura spewed out from the jade box, and the sky above the hall lit up with a charming glow, as if two phoenixes were hovering in the glow. Luo Tan's eyes finally changed a little, and he was a little surprised. "Imperial medicine? No, its spiritual energy is far more than that of imperial medicine, and it is close to fairy medicine? Have you cultivated fairy medicine? Immortal medicine, this has exceeded the scope of cultivation by Hedeo powerful people. Not to mention powerful people, even real immortals may not be able to cultivate fairy medicine. Over the past 10,000 years, Luo Tan has tried many times to cultivate elixirs, but all of them failed. You must know that her medicine immortal body is naturally close to all kinds of elixirs and treasures in the world, but even she has never cultivated an elixir." At this moment, Emperor Dapen actually took out such a quasi-immortal elixir. Naturally, astonishing. Emperor Dapen smiled. Even the Emperor of Medicine has never cultivated a fairy medicine, let alone others. "I got this elixir by chance before. It is in front of a cliff in the north. The spiritual energy of the monks passing there will be sealed. Even when I stepped into it, the spiritual energy seemed to be suppressed." Luo Tan nodded silently, relieved. Kyushu is a miraculous place where an immortal was born. In this vast and endless alien starry sky, only Kyushu can give birth to such an existence as an immortal. And when the immortal died in the past, he left various miracles in Kyushu. This elixir may also be from the hands of the immortal. Peng Huan came to me, probably not just to show off this elixir, Luo Tan said calmly. "The medicine emperor is very smart. In fact, I am here to borrow something from you." Luo Tan raised his eyebrows slightly. "What?" "The cauldron of transformation of all things into qi," Emperor Dapen said, staring closely into Luo Tan's eyes. I know the importance of the cauldron of transformation of qi of all things to Yuzhou. I can swear that I will return the cauldron of transformation of qi of all things in half a month. Luo Tan seemed to realize something, and said softly, "Do you want to refine the elixir and become an immortal?" She quickly shook her head. In these 9 states, even I am not sure that I can refine the immortal elixir. Even if you borrow the cauldron of transformation of qi of all things, how are you going to refine the elixir? Emperor Daipen smiled and said, "There is no need for the Emperor of Medicine to consider this. What the Emperor of Medicine really wants to consider is whether he can use this cauldron of all things to transform into qi." "What if I refuse?" Luo Tan asked casually. The smile on Emperor Daipen's face faded slightly, and he spoke slowly. "The last time the Qing Emperor emerged and ascended, all parties in Kyushu took action more or less secretly, but Yuzhou and the Demon Realm were the only exceptions, and in the end, it also led to the Qing Emperor successfully ascended to heaven and broke the situation since the founding of Kyushu." Luo Tan chuckled, "Are you blaming me for not taking action to stop Qing Emperor?" Although his smile was bright, his tone was a bit cold. Emperor Daipen shook his head, "I'm just a little pity. With the reputation of Emperor Yao in Kyushu, if you were willing to call for it, there must be many powerful people who are willing to sell your face." "But what's the benefit to me after doing this?" Luo Tan asked lightly. "I know that Yunzhou was also involved when the Qing Emperor emerged and ascended, but you didn't make much effort in secret that time. You just wanted to reap the benefits, didn't you?" Luo Tan continued. "Yunzhou wanted to reap the benefits, but now he secretly accused her?" Seeing that Luo Tan's face was a little unhappy, Emperor Daipen's eyes flickered and he quickly smiled and said, "The Emperor of Medicine has the Emperor's plans. If I really have any objections to this, I would have already spoken to you, so why bother, waiting until today? Besides, it's too late to say anything now. The Qing Emperor has emerged, and the Yaokai Holy Land is the only one. If in the future, as Yaokai gradually grows, she starts to have ideas about other forces, which will be troublesome." Emperor Daipen changed the topic. "If I can ascend to heaven at this time, I can guarantee that Yuzhou will always be Yunzhou's unwavering ally in the future." Luo Tan hummed softly, "I'll think about it first." Emperor Daipen frowned slightly. Although he was a little dissatisfied with the result, since the other party did not refuse clearly, it meant that there was something going on, and it was not good to continue to push her now. Soon, he changed the topic. "If I remember correctly, it seems that my beloved concubine has also come to Yuzhou. Is she in your palace now?" Luo Tan nodded lightly. "If you want to see her, go ahead. However, the princess is an important guest of my Yuzhou, and I don't want to see unnecessary disputes in my territory." Emperor Daipen nodded. "That's natural. No matter what happens, I will not cause trouble to my allies." Luo Tan smiled slightly and watched as the Daipen Emperor turned into an afterimage and disappeared from the field of vision, and then a hint of coldness gradually appeared in his eyes. "Ally? Do you really think she doesn't know how Yunzhou has gradually become stronger and stronger over the years?" She casually withdrew her gaze and said calmly, "Go to Tangxue Palace to prepare a flower petal bath." The maid walked into the hall and was stunned for a moment when she heard Her Majesty the Queen's words, "Your Majesty is going to Tangxue Palace." Tangxue Palace is an extremely luxurious place. In the past, it was only occasionally given to talented daughters of noble families. There were even rumors that those who bathed in Tangxue Palace could improve their cultivation level by 1 level in just a few days. Grade. As the medicine king of Yuzhou, it's okay to be a little extravagant, but His Majesty just visited a few days ago, and he didn't expect to go there again today, which is a bit rare. The maid quickly reacted and bowed slightly. "Yes, I will do it right away." Musian was sitting under the pavilion, seeming to be casually admiring the scenery outside the pavilion, but in fact he was secretly sizing up the princess, whose figure was as alluring as a ripe peach. There is no doubt that the Princess of Yunzhou is indeed a very beautiful woman. When Musian sat down across from her, he realized that she was wearing a waist-cinching long skirt. A thin ribbon outlined her slim waist. Her beautiful eyes were always blurry when looking at people, as if with spring in her mouth, charming and gentle. However, from the way the princess dared to fight with Yao Meng before, it is not difficult to guess that this woman only looks tender and gentle on the surface. In fact, when you get close to her, you will find that this woman is like a deep pool of water. Completely unfathomable. I want to confirm something. At this time, the princess's voice brought Musian's thoughts back to reality. She was playing with the teacup in one hand and staring at Musian with a pair of gentle and charming eyes. You and Qing Emperor are Taoist lovers, right? Although she was not posing from beginning to end, every move she made seemed to have an alluring charm, like a ripe peach waiting for others to pick it. It's no wonder that Emperor Daipen is so obsessed with her. This princess is not only outstanding in strength, but also in temperament and appearance. Sister Qingdi and I are indeed Taoist lovers. Musian did not deny it. Everyone in Zhou knew about it, not to mention that he had just met the princess when he came to Yuzhou with Yao Meng. The princess could see how close Yao Meng was to Musian at that time. It's more about honesty. I like good honest kids. The princess's beautiful face under the veil showed a charming smile. She tilted her head slightly and looked at Musian. Then what is your relationship with Luotan? Her words were always extremely soft, as if she were asking a common question, but her tone was full of the arrogance of a superior. Obviously, although Musian is Qingdi's Taoist companion, the return to the Void Realm is the return to the Void Realm. To her, Musian is just a junior. For juniors, there is no need to care about attitude. Since the princess saw everything just now, why bother asking now? Musian also saw the princess's arrogance, so his tone became much more casual. I know you have a close relationship with her, but I don't understand why she has never had physical contact with anyone of the opposite sex in the 10,000 years since joining the Tao. She is immersed in her immortal dynasty and alchemy, but why? Before the princess finished speaking, Musian interrupted lightly. Since you heard the conversation between me and her earlier, you should also have heard what she said later, right? The princess was silent for a moment. Almighty's lifespan is extremely long, and since she is the king of medicine, her lifespan is even more difficult to estimate. Just doing the same thing day after day will inevitably lead to boredom over time. Musian said, that's why your majesty will be close to me at this time. I think he hopes to find some lubricant in this boring life. Is this explanation reasonable enough? I know you are her best friend, but you have already given such a reasonable explanation, so don't bother me anymore. However, when the princess heard this, she couldn't help but shook her head slowly. With her character, it is impossible for her to choose a young monk who has just returned to the void through spiritual training, not to mention you already have a Taoist companion. Her beautiful eyes stared at Musian tenderly. Can't you tell me the real reason? Musian sighed softly. I have told you everything I know. If you don't believe it, there is nothing I can do. He paused and continued, maybe it's because when the Lianji sect held an alchemy competition in the past, your majesty saw that I had some attainments in alchemy, so he had some love for talents. Just her love for talent won't make her so obsessed with you. The princess spoke again, her voice always gentle, as if gently tickling people's hearts, and whispered, you should know Luotan's identity, right? Before Musian could answer, she said leisurely, she is the Empress of Yuzhou. In Yuzhou, her status is equal to that of a god. If the incident of your intimacy with her today spreads to the outside world, what do you think will happen? Woolen cloth. Is this trying to beat a mandarin duck? Musian nodded lightly. I know, so she and I were not so intimate outside. If the princess hadn't been present today, I'm afraid no one else would know about it. The princess's beautiful eyebrows frowned slightly inadvertently. This little monk seemed easy to talk to, but turned out to be soft-spoken. How on earth can my little friend be willing to leave her? She had realized that Musian was a tough opponent, but she was also a little dissatisfied with Musian's persistent pursuit. She said calmly, "Is one imperial medicine enough?" Musian was startled, and his eyes became a little more playful. "I will give the princess 2 imperial medicines, how about you pack them for me too?" For the first time, the princess' eyes revealed a hint of sullenness, but in a flash, her eyes returned to their former gentleness. As expected, he is Qing Emperor's Taoist companion. His strength is not that great, but he is quite eloquent. Musian shrugged. "Senior, do you really think that one imperial medicine can make people surrender?" It took a lot of effort to hug Luo Tan's jade legs. "No matter what, it's impossible to give up just because of an imperial medicine, right? Not to mention the status of the Empress in Yuzhou, her appearance, and even the dual cultivation blessings brought by the natural furnace cauldron are no longer something that can be measured by an imperial medicine." "What do you want?" The princess's tone was a little less gentle and a little more cold. "Once word spreads about Musian and Luo Tan's reputation will undoubtedly be damaged. If Musian had no Taoist companion, the most common rumors from the outside world would be that His Majesty the Medicine Emperor likes to refine copper or something. But the problem is, Musian has a Taoist companion, and his Taoist companion is King Di. What would happen if Emperor Qing knew about this?" Muse Hainan asked what would happen if she said, "Princess, you don't want the matter between Luo Tan and me to spread to the outside world." "You can't force feelings, senior, it's better not to interfere," Musian thought to himself, but Musian did not waste any more time and stood up to leave. When the princess saw this, her red lips slightly opened, and she was about to call out to Musian. But at this moment, a clear voice suddenly came from the distance. "I haven't found anyone after searching for a long time. It turns out that my beloved concubine is sitting here alone." With a dazzling golden light flashing, the Daipen Emperor descended under the pavilion almost instantly, and the vast spiritual energy filled the entire world in an instant. As the voice fell, Musian's footsteps paused slightly, and he secretly looked at the tall man in front of him. "Is this person the Lord of Yunzhou, Emperor Daipen?" As the man arrived, the smile on the princess's face became a little colder, and she said calmly, "Why are you here?" "I have something I want to discuss with the Emperor of Medicine, so I stopped by to see you," Emperor Daipen said, and when he saw the unfamiliarity and distance in the princess's smile, his mood suddenly sank a bit. Soon after, he noticed Musian not far from his beloved concubine, and frowned. "Who is this little monk?" While speaking, he looked at Musian sharply, as if looking down from a high position. On the surface, he was asking the princess, but in fact, he was waiting for Musian's humble answer. The princess glanced at Musian, took the initiative to help him out, and said softly, "I have something to ask him, so I asked him to stay here for the time being." Hearing this, Emperor Daipen had a hint of coldness in his eyes. What is there to talk about with a young monk who has just returned to the void through spiritual training? Although Emperor Daipen has never touched this princess in the past few years, in the heart of the Lord of Yunzhou, he has long regarded the most beautiful woman in Yunzhou as a forbidden love. After all, no matter what, the princess is still his apparent fiancée. As a result, I actually saw a handsome, weak young monk and his fiancée talking freely under a pavilion. How could I not be angry as the leader of a state? And to him, this little monk is just an ant, and he can be crushed to death with just one kick. But when the other party saw him, he didn't show any fear at all. Do you really think that he wouldn't dare to do so just because the princess was present? Kill him. Emperor Daipen's eyes were cold, containing murderous intent, and he said in a calm tone, "What were you talking about with my beloved concubine just now?" There was invisible pressure in his words. Sure enough, he saw a look of panic on the little monk's face. Then, he looked at the princess with an expression of embarrassment on his face. Your Highness, what I talked to you just now should not be revealed, right? What just happened involved Luo Tan's privacy, so naturally she couldn't talk about it. The princess also knew this, so she could only say in a soft tone, well, this matter has nothing to do with you, you can go back first. Musian turned around to leave, but at this moment, he felt an extremely powerful spiritual energy quietly descending from behind. The spiritual energy surged in like a tsunami, as if it was going to crush people's knees. It was extremely powerful. Emperor Dapen, it was my invitation that he came here just now. What do you want to do to him now? The princess frowned. The moment she spoke, an invisible aura wall blocked the power brought by Emperor Dapen. Pressure. It would have been fine if the princess didn't stop her, but her defense of Musian completely ignited Emperor Dapen's anger. What important matter can you and a young monk have to discuss? And you can't tell me. The princess frowned slightly. As I said just now, this matter has nothing to do with you, and it does not involve your affairs. Also, you and I are just husband and wife outside, but we don't interfere with each other. You also agreed to this at the beginning, didn't you? This time the princess used sound transmission. Seeing that his fiancée was so protective of an outsider, Emperor Dapen's eyes were full of undisguised murderous intent and anger. For a young monk who had just returned to the void, no matter what the purpose of approaching his beloved concubine, it would be a pity to die. Are you going to fall out with me just because of a little monk? Emperor Dapen showed a cold look on his face. He wanted to see how the princess would react if he took action. However, when he had just taken half a step, a clear and sweet voice came from the distance, Mr. Mu is my distinguished guest in Yuzhou. If you touch him, don't blame me for not talking about our past allies. When the woman's voice fell, the originally condensed spiritual energy of Emperor Dapen was stagnated. He seemed to have realized something, his eyes widened slightly, and he looked at Musian with some surprise. Mr. Mu, Musianen? Are you the young monk who married King Di? Musian ignored it. This person's words and deeds are all almighty and condescending, and respect is mutual. Since the other party doesn't give face, why should he care? A trace of anger flashed in Emperor Dapen's eyes. In his opinion, Qing Emperor is Qing Emperor, and Musian is Musian. Even though the two are married, Musian is just a young man who has just entered the world of immortality. The monk actually put on airs in front of him. However, even the Medicine Emperor cares so much about him. Does the Medicine Emperor want to please the Qing Emperor, or, is there any secret in this person that the Medicine Emperor should protect? As if he had guessed what Emperor Dapen was thinking, Luo Tan walked over with white jade boots and said in a calm tone, the Qing Emperor came to Yuzhou before and asked me to take care of Mr. Mu in the past few days. If he gets injured in Yuzhou, hurt, is the Emperor Dapen planning to try out what kind of power Jingxi Qinglian can exert after reaching the Ascension realm? Emperor Dapen was speechless for a moment. Today's Qing Emperor is in the Ascended realm. He doesn't know what the relationship between Qing Emperor and Musian is like, but if he really offends Qing Emperor because of Musian, it's not worth it. Emperor Dapen snorted coldly, I didn't intend to touch him just now, but he and my beloved concubine were chatting under a pavilion. Because of this, I was curious and asked him a few more questions, but I never thought that King Di would be a Taoist companion. After that, it seemed like this little friend Mu didn't even understand the principle of respecting his seniors. Naturally, it was impossible to give in at this time. After all, to Emperor Dapen, Musian was just a little monk, and he was nothing without Qing Emperor. Such a young monk was actually talking to his beloved concubine under the pavilion just now, and he even had a secret. When he thought of this, Emperor Dapen felt as if there was unknown anger burning in his heart. Luo Tan smiled lightly and said, although Mr. Mu has not been practicing for a long time, he is now King Di's husband. In fact, it doesn't matter if he is equal to you and me. Does Emperor Dapen have anything else to do? A powerful person staying in Yuzhou will eventually make the monks below him feel uneasy. Luo Tan's tone was indifferent, but his words already contained the meaning of seeing off guests. Emperor Daipen stared at Musian sharply. After a while, he forced himself to calm down, withdrew his gaze and said, "Emperor Yao, I hope you can think carefully about today's matter. It is both for you and for me. It's good, I can exchange it for an imperial medicine." Having said that, he glanced at the sexy and graceful princess next to him one last time, then turned around and transformed into Kunpeng and disappeared into the sky. The princess seemed to be somewhat concerned about the purpose of the great Peng Emperor today, and asked, "What did he tell you?" Luo Tan said lightly, "He wants to borrow the cauldron of all things transformed into qi." The princess was stunned for a moment, as if she had not expected that the great Peng Emperor would actually set his sights on the cauldron of all things transformed into qi. Why would he borrow the cauldron of all things transformed into qi for no reason? Her eyes flickered as she thought about this matter. "Thanks to you for protecting Master Mu today, otherwise if something really happened, I would not be able to explain to the Green Emperor." After a moment, Luo Tan spoke to break the princess's thoughts, and then she looked at Musian with her beautiful eyes and said softly, "Come with me." "Where to?" Musian asked. "My bedroom." The moment Luo Tan almost spoke, the princess subconsciously raised her head and looked at her. Luo Tan's every move was always noble and elegant. When he walked over, the tassels of his golden hairpin swayed gently. He smiled and said, "Don't you want to ask me about alchemy? Is it really just a simple discussion of elixirs?" Musian came back to his senses and looked at the princess and said, "Then we will take our leave first, Your Highness." The princess stared at the direction where the two left, and couldn't help but frown slightly. There was a little more doubt in her beautiful eyes that were tender as water in the past. This person must have some secrets, otherwise, a Qing emperor is already outrageous, and it doesn't make sense that even Luo Tan would be deeply involved in it. It's impossible that she just wants to refine that copper, right? When the princess thought of this, an unrealistic idea suddenly flashed through her mind. She remembered a sentence Luo Tan said when she just arrived. The secret of ascension. She stared at the direction where the two left, and her beautiful eyes flashed with a strange light. The update is a little late, but 7,000 words is still good enough. Is it okay to ask for a vote? So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 502. Tangxia Palace. After retreating from the crowd, Luo Tan took off his white boots and then leaned into the bath. The water covered his shoulders and the curtains outside the bath hung low. She tilted her head, looked through the curtain at the young man sitting not far away, and said with a smile, "Don't take it to heart today. Emperor Daipen has several concubines, but he is the only one who cares most about this princess. Seeing you and her talking freely under a pavilion, it is inevitable that you will lose your sense of proportion. I have nothing to do with the princess, it's just that Emperor Daipen has filled up too many things in his own mind." Musian shook his head and didn't really care about this matter. After all, he does not have any intimate relationship with the princess now. "Looking at how calm you are, I guess you have never had anything happen to her." There was no expression on Luo Tan's beautiful face. She gently held the petals and admired the palace in the snow. She said quietly, "But didn't you go back to rest today? Why are you with the princess again?" "I met the princess on the way back. She said she had something to ask me, so she asked me to stay and chat for a few words," Musian replied sincerely. "Then you agreed?" Luo Tan's beautiful eyes looked at Musian, staring at the vague figure through the gauze-like curtains, and said in a warning tone, "First of all, let me remind you that the princess does look gentle, which may make many men subconsciously relax their guard against her. However, in Yunzhou these years, her voice has even been higher than that of her fiancé. You should understand. What do I mean?" I understand, it means that the princess looks gentle and beautiful, but she is actually very scheming, unlike me, who is always thinking about you. Musian's understanding ability is full. He nodded reservedly. I understand. In fact, if I had to say anything about today's matter, it was for your sake that Her Royal Highness would chat with me. Because of me. Luo Tan's tone was a little more doubtful. She doubts our relationship, and is also worried that your reputation will be damaged if the Kyushu monks find out about you and me, Musian explained. Maybe she saw it when we were in the garden before. Luo Tan hummed, but said no more. If our matter really spreads, it will not be good for His Majesty's reputation. Musian was a little worried. Today, His Majesty had another conflict with Emperor Dapen because of my affairs. What if he knows about our affairs and uses it to make a big fuss in the future? Sister, I'm very worried about you, Musian continued. You are a rare talent. Since you are worried about me, why not stay in Yuzhou from now on, and I will take care of other things. Luo Tan chuckled, and saw Musian's purpose. You have said so much, but you actually want to know why Emperor Dapen came to me today to borrow the cauldron of all things transforming chi, right? Musian was silent for a while. Zhou is so big that many monks may not be able to leave even one state in their lifetime. For Musian, Yunzhou is an extremely mysterious place, and Yuzhou has always had intersections with Yunzhou. If he can learn something about it through Luo Tan's mouth, it may be useful in the future. If you want to know more about Yunzhou, you might as well ask the princess. She knows much more than I do. Luo Tan's tone and attitude suddenly became a little colder. The princess and I are neither relatives nor friends. We can't even be called acquaintances. It's impossible to understand her through her mouth. Musian smiled bitterly. How about I introduce you to him? Luo Tan looked in the direction of Musian and said in a soft and calm tone. Musian almost nodded in agreement. But soon he realized that there was something in Luo Tan's words. Not only Emperor Dapen, Luo Tan was also concerned about what he and the princess had talked about under that pavilion before. No need, let everything take its course. Besides, Her Royal Highness the Princess is quite hostile to me because of your matter. Musian sighed with a somewhat helpless tone. However, what Her Royal Highness the Princess said is quite reasonable. If the matter between your Majesty and I is spread to the outside, I will be fine, but I'm afraid your reputation. Wow! The woman behind the curtain stood up and changed her clothes under the service of the personal maid. After a while, the curtain was opened, and a gorgeous and elegant beauty in a loose white dress came into view. Luo Tan looked at Musian with a faint smile. As long as you don't care, as for me, don't say the news won't get out. Even if it does get out, it doesn't matter. At worst, I will get married to you in Yuzhou, and we will just go along with the flow. Then Sister Kingdi came back and found out about this, so she probably had to throw her into a small dark room on the spot. Musian smiled and said nothing. He left Tangxia Palace with Luo Tan and walked along a quiet path to the dormitory. It seemed that it was because she had just finished bathing. When the woman walked in front, there seemed to be a particularly pleasant fragrance floating into the tip of her nose. Her beautiful face was slightly covered by black silk, and there was a delicate red flower between her eyebrows. It is in the shape of a plum blossom. The figure has charming curves, and every move seems to be full of the Empress's nobility and elegance. Not long after, the two of them arrived in front of Daoka Palace. Luo Tan took Musian to a quiet room. There were 2 chairs, an exquisitely crafted table, and soft white cloth spread on the table. The quiet room was surrounded by embellished with intertwined pink and white flowers. The space is spacious and everything feels extremely luxurious. The graceful maids walked into the quiet room carrying dinner plates and brought many medicinal dishes to the table one by one. Almost every medicinal dish exudes a faint glow, and the spiritual energy on the plate is quite extraordinary. You all should retreat first, Luo Tan ordered softly. After all the maids left and closed the lattice door, Luo Tan, who was wearing a loose snow-white skirt and robe, sat on a chair. Because she had just taken a bath, her black hair was slightly messy, so she simply pulled it up with a hairpin. The strands of hair hanging down from the forehead exude a bit of charm. Musian glanced at the table and saw the medicinal meals on the white jade plates in front of the table. Then he glanced at the Empress sitting opposite, and his eyes were fixed on her chest for almost an instant. It's really unfathomable. But when you stare into the abyss may also be staring at you. Musian quickly looked back and assumed the posture of a gentleman. Luo Tan seemed to have noticed something, and looked at Musian teasingly. Musian said sternly, "Your Majesty actually doesn't need to prepare the medicinal diet specially, but you still have to go through a lot of troubles, which makes me feel a little regretful." Luo Tan held her fragrant cheeks in her hands, placed her plump breasts on the table, and said with a smile, "The medicinal food in Yuzhou is different from other places. You only need to taste it to know the secret." Musian calmly picked up the chopsticks and took a bite of the food, peeking at her from time to time. "I have to say that with a beautiful woman by my side, this medicinal meal is indeed quite delicious. Such a top-notch beauty, with a voluptuous figure, and the unconcealable charm between her eyebrows and eyes at this moment, it is not an exaggeration to say that she is beautiful and delicious. Today Emperor Daipen wants to borrow Yuzhou's chi-transforming cauldron. Do you think we should borrow it from him?" Luo Tan admired Musian across the table and asked a question. Musian was startled, then said calmly, "Your Majesty, if I remember correctly, Yunzhou and Yuzhou have always been allies in the past, right? The matter of Emperor Daipen's wish to use the 10,000 things to transform Qi Cauldron should be left to you yourself. Let's make a decision. It's not convenient for you to interrupt." Luo Tan casually took a bite of the pastry on the white jade plate, put it into her red mouth, and said unhurriedly, "With the relationship between you and me, we don't need to be so harsh. If you have anything to say, just say it yes. Your Majesty should already have the answer in his mind, so why bother asking me again?" Musian saw through Luo Tan's thoughts at a glance. The Qi Cauldron of all things is more often used to refine elixirs. The only person in the world who can possibly refine elixirs is your Majesty. The only way Emperor Daipen wants to transform everything into a Qi Cauldron is for the immortal elixir. But according to what His Majesty just said, he wants to ask you to borrow the cauldron, not to ask you to help refine the elixir. This makes people have to be concerned. I think your Majesty may have some doubts about this, or even scruples. Luo Tan stared at Musian silently. "Sometimes I wonder why I didn't get to know you earlier." Even without the physical blessing of the natural furnace cauldron, Musian could still assist her. "Then, if you have anything to do, let Musian do it, and if you have nothing to do, do Musian. It's just a pity that it's too late to think about this now." "You guessed it right. I do have some doubts about Emperor Daipen suddenly wanting to borrow the cauldron." Luo Tan said. He had previously obtained an elixir that was close to being an immortal. Musian was a little surprised. So Emperor Daipen borrowed the cauldron really to refine the elixir? But besides you, who else in the world is sure that he can refine the immortal elixir? Luo Tan shook his head gently. "I can't guess what Emperor Daipen wants to do, but maybe the answer will be revealed after the princess returns to Yunzhou." Musian was startled. "Didn't you say that the relationship between them is not very good?" "It is indeed not very good, but after all, the princess has a distinguished status in Yunzhou, and it is impossible for Emperor Daipen's movements to be completely hidden from her." Luo Tan looked at Musian and smiled lightly. "Let's not talk about it now. Didn't you ask me today about how to combine heaven's spiritual energy with elixirs? Does your Majesty already have a solution?" A glimmer of light flashed in Musian's eyes. Luo Tan took out a jade bottle from his sleeve and placed it on the table, then poured out a second-grade small returning pill. She played with this elixir, which was worthless on the market, but looked at Musian intentionally or unintentionally. "Do you know the difference between high-grade elixirs and low-grade elixirs?" Musian pondered for a moment. "If I remember correctly, the higher the level of the elixir, the more likely it is to cause a calamity. If some alchemists are not strong enough, the elixirs they refine may even turn into. But there are some exceptions for some elixirs. Luo Tan looked into Musian's eyes and said with a faint smile, everything has a spirit, and the same goes for elixirs. The moment some high-grade elixirs are just released, there will be thoughts of running away. Warm reminder, if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. And these high-quality elixirs can often resist elixir tribulations on their own without the protection of an alchemist. Musian heard the voiceover of Luo Tan's words, Your Majesty, what do you mean? I need to refine high-grade elixirs to carry the spiritual energy of heaven. Heaven's spiritual energy is as strong as the sea, and often the moment the elixir is first injected, the elixir may break into pieces in an instant. However, the higher the grade of the elixir, the less likely it is to break. He had previously refined the second-grade elixir because his alchemy skills could only support him in refining the second-grade elixir. However, if he were to refine the high-grade elixir, by then what will happen if it is supplemented by heavenly spiritual energy? Indeed, in the past, because my level of alchemy was average and the alchemy conference was imminent, I had no choice but to refine the small return pill, but now that I have enough leisure, I can slowly hone my alchemy skills. Musian said softly to himself, thinking. In addition, there is actually another method that can also refine the heavenly elixir you want. Luo Tan's words instantly attracted Musian's attention. What method? Musian asked. All elixirs in the world are not required to be completed by one person. Some high-grade elixirs have great requirements on the spirit and aura of the alchemist. Therefore, some high-grade elixirs are often made by 2 or 3 people. Finish. You mean, His Majesty and I will make elixirs together? Musian understood what Luo Tan meant. During the previous elixir refining competition, Ye Lingxuan's elixir had some mistakes. Musian also assisted on the side and finally completed the elixir. The unique heavenly elixir in the world. In the last alchemy competition, you finally assisted the Queen of the Forbidden Zone to win the final victory in this way. I think you should be familiar with this method of alchemy, right? Luo Tan picked up the vegetables on his plate, put them into Musian's bowl, and looked at him with a smile. Musian also stared at this noble and beautiful face. The white dress as flawless as snow clung to her plump and graceful body, and her curves were exposed, as if her every move was even the result of taking medicinal food. The movements are all extremely elegant. At this time, Luo Tan suddenly stood up, supported the table with both hands, and slowly approached the young man. Musian subconsciously raised his head and glanced at her, and then, as if attracted by some gravity, his eyes uncontrollably glanced down her neck. This time I really don't blame Musian. After all, any normal man can't help but want to take a look, not to mention that the atmosphere between the two is so ambiguous at the moment. Luo Tan obviously noticed the young man's eyes. It was disrespectful for anyone in Yuzhou to look directly at the Empress. But facing Musian's direct gaze at this moment, not only did she not feel angry at all, but the corners of her mouth were filled with anger. Inadvertently a touch of arc was evoked. Musian watched as her beautiful face came closer to him, getting closer and closer. At this moment, it seemed that the flow of time had become extremely slow. Finally, Musian could no longer hold back. As he stood up, he put his arms around Luo Tan's neck, and then kissed her brightly rouged red lips. Finally tasted it. Musian was a little regretful that he was disturbed by the Daipen Emperor once before, but now in this quiet room, no one will disturb him again. Musian was about to close his eyes and enjoy the softness of the Empress's red lips, but at this moment, Luo Tan seemed to notice something, her eyelashes trembled slightly, and she slowly opened her eyes. What's wrong? Before Musian finished speaking, Luo Tan suddenly put his fingertips in front of his red lips and said shush, then took Musian's hand and pulled him under his desk before he could speak. "She's here," Luotan said to Musian through sound transmission. Almost at the same time, there was a knock on the door outside the quiet room, followed by a woman's soft voice, "Is it convenient to come in now?" Luotan glanced at the young man below inadvertently, then covered him with a cloth, and then wrapped his body with spiritual energy to block Musian's breath. He raised his head and showed his usual elegant posture, and said with a smile, "Between you and me. No need to be so polite, come in." As the words fell, the door of the quiet room was opened. Luotan looked at his close friend who came into view and smiled, "I just happened to have some medicinal food prepared. You can enjoy it together when you come." The charming princess glanced at the medicinal food on the table, and then said with a half smile, "Let's forget it, so as not to ruin your good deeds. This is for the little monk named Musian, right? Where is he now?" The princess looked at Luotan for a few times and asked. Luotan crossed his legs under the table and smiled, "He just finished eating the medicinal food and left." The princess raised her eyebrows slightly and sat down opposite Luotan. "Does it look like he is avoiding me on purpose?" Luotan said calmly, "You persuaded him to leave my side as soon as we met him. Naturally, he doesn't want to see you. Do you know everything?" "It seems that Musian complained to Luotan." The princess sighed softly, "Even if you don't care about your reputation, you don't care if Qing Emperor learns that his Taoist companion has been." When she said this, she suddenly lost her voice and just turned her face away, with two faint blushes appearing on her fair face. It has to be said that although she is veiled, it is not difficult to see what kind of appearance this princess has. "Don't worry, I have my own sense of discretion," Luotan said in a calm tone. "You came to see me suddenly, you must have something important to say, right?" The princess quickly calmed down her thoughts and nodded slightly. "I may know why Emperor Dapen wants to borrow the cauldron of all things." She stared into Luotan's eyes and said, "In the northern Xinyuan, even the great masters of Hedao will be suppressed if they enter there. In the past, Dapen Emperor once entered Xinyuan, and at that time he boasted to me that he had found a way to ascend to the sky." "Xinyuan? Isn't that where forbidden monsters live?" "Those sealed old monsters are willing to let Dapen Emperor enter there," Luotan's eyes flickered and hesitantly said. "In the 9 provinces, there are several forbidden places, and those forbidden places are all evolved from ancient forbidden creatures. According to Luotan's deduction, the lifespan of these forbidden creatures is even longer than that of several great masters of Hedao today. However, they seem to be sealed in there by someone and cannot leave for life. Because they have been sealed for too long, these forbidden creatures have violent tempers, and any cultivator who sets foot in them will be attacked by them. But Dapen Emperor not only set foot in the forbidden place, but also took away a fairy medicine from it." The mature and beautiful princess sat on the chair, staring, and said solemnly, "This matter is a bit strange. I will investigate it after I return to Yunzhou. The all things transformed into Qi cauldron, don't lend it out for the time being." Luotan chuckled, "Do you really think I plan to borrow the cauldron? The all things transformed into Qi cauldron is the sacred object of Yuzhou. It is impossible for it to appear anywhere outside Yuzhou. It doesn't matter who borrows it." "What if it's Musian?" the princess suddenly asked casually. Luotan's smile slightly restrained. "Why did you suddenly mention him?" Seeing this, the princess's beautiful face under the veil finally added a bit of unbelievable and strange look. "You didn't refuse at the first time. Could it be that if Musian really wanted to borrow the cauldron, you really planned to lend it to him? What kind of magic potion did that person give you?" The all things transformed into Qi cauldron can be said to be the cornerstone of Yuzhou, carrying the wish of Yuzhou, you. At this moment, the princess felt that her chest hurt a little because of anger, and she didn't know what to say to Luotan for a while. She joined the Dao earlier than Luotan, and she had saved Luotan once in the past. The princess always regarded Luotan as her sister. But now, Not only did he find a Taoist partner, but the Taoist partner he found also had another woman. That woman was the Green Emperor. "What's so good about Musian that you have to protect him so much?" the mature woman sighed softly. Even with a veil, it was not difficult to imagine how ugly her beautiful face looked under the veil. Because of Musian, she even had a conflict with the Great Peng Emperor. Although she didn't care what the Great Peng Emperor thought. Luo Tan stared at the princess with complicated eyes and said faintly, "You don't understand. It seems that I can't persuade you, but Musian is the Taoist partner of the Green Emperor after all. If you are intimate with him, remember not to let people outside know." The princess sighed helplessly, and there was a bit more sadness between her eyebrows. After not seeing each other for a long time, she did not expect that this close friend actually had such a strange hobby of loving other people's husbands. And the other party was a young cultivator who seemed to be less than 20 years old. Qingdi was also, Yehuang was also. These two female emperors were so arrogant. How could they be so devoted to a young cultivator now? In addition to the fact that the young cultivator had a good-looking face and looked weak, which could easily arouse the overflow of maternal love in women, what other advantages did he have? Talent. Luck. Luo Tan and Qingdi had seen these things many times in the past, and they knew that they had nothing to do with these two things. Maybe it was just because they were congenial. The princess had to comfort herself in this way. "Sister, eat some medicinal food before leaving." Luo Tan saw that the princess seemed to have given up, and couldn't help but invite with a smile. The princess glanced at Luo Tan, and then she lifted the veil, revealing a breathtakingly beautiful face. It's no wonder that Dai Pengguang has been pursuing the princess all these years and refused to give up. Such a face is indeed extremely rare in this world. Huh? When did you have the leisure to refine this grade of elixir? At this time, the princess suddenly made a doubtful sound and picked up the small jade bottle on the table. Luo Tan's eyes changed slightly and said, "Wait." Before she finished speaking, the princess had already opened the jade bottle and chuckled, "Second grade elixir, even those children in Yuzhou can refine this thing, right? I didn't expect you to have such leisure to refine Xiao Huan Dan." Her voice suddenly stagnated, as if she noticed something unusual, frowned, lowered her head and sniffed the elixir in the jade bottle. After being silent for an unknown period of time, the princess slowly raised her head, her eyes suddenly became sharper, and she stared at Luo Tan. "This elixir comes from the heaven. Where did you get it from?" "Warm Ti."